Hello there, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you.
It's almost like we just didn't talk for 5 minutes and this is the first time we meet.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it?
So, how are you doing? It's been, I think, only last week that we wrote, and I remember like reading your blog. So I guess you could say you're a blogger, right?
Yes, oh, definitely I am. I guess this is where I introduce myself to your viewers who may not know me. So I'm Shintar, and I'm an unofficial SWTOR content creator of the old school kind, in that all my content is written. And yeah, I've been doing that since the game launched, and I'm still doing it today. So I've been doing the SWTOR blog thing for almost 13 years, and with no real interruptions, really. I think there were a couple months where I only made a few posts because I wasn't feeling it, but there was never a real break.
Crazy. Yeah, I did some reading on your blog, like, of course, in preparation. But I remember that, I think some years ago, I already found it, not sure where. And I read some articles there. But you have been, yeah, I scrolled back to the beginning, I think yesterday. And the first post was, I think, from 2011 or something, right? So.
Yep, it's because I was already a blogger beforehand when I was playing World of Warcraft.
Ah, okay.
And then I tried SWTOR, and at first I didn't plan to blog about it as well, but I think I'd been playing for 3 days, and I was like, I have opinions. I need to write them down.
Yeah.
And that's how it started. And then I actually stopped playing WoW and just played SWTOR. I've since then also started WoW again and played occasionally, but SWTOR has remained my main game ever since.
Uh-huh. And I saw you also have a YouTube channel, but mostly you're like focused on the blogging, right?
Yeah, the YouTube channel is, I mean, my first video was also from, I think, 2012 or something. Back then, YouTube was still very new, and, you know, people weren't doing it professionally or anything. I remember having to verify my identity to be allowed to upload more than 10 minutes. That was a fun thing. But yeah, so I just use it for random fun things. So the first video I ever uploaded was like a compilation of some hardball clips set to some K-pop song, I think.
Nice.
So it's just some random stuff. Mostly I upload, I don't know, sometimes funny cutscenes from the story when I think, oh, that was a really funny moment, or little clips from stuff that happened with my guild, or boss kills with my guild, that sort of thing. So it's not really, I don't view it as that one as a content creation thing. It's really just something for my friends. I did dabble a little bit with video content creation, I think during Knights of the Eternal Throne it was, because I started a series called Pugging with Shintar, where I recorded myself doing vet mode flashpoints and leveling a character through them. And, you know, I would comment on my pugs and stuff, since I thought that was a funny idea. And I did get some very nice comments on that. There were some people that really liked it. But I eventually stepped away again from that one because it was just so much work, just recording yourself for an hour and then editing everything. It was so much more work than the blogging. And I just didn't have that much time to do all the things.
Yeah, it does take some time. But I think like writing a properly, you know, thought out and worded blog post also takes some time. Like I tried recently to, you know, for some of the guides that I do anyway, I usually write a script, for example. And then I thought, I mean, if I have the script anyway, which I use for the recording, I might as well, you know, find some way to publish it on some website. And then, you know, people who don't like the videos, they maybe just want to read, you know, then they can read it there. But that actually also takes a bunch of time, at least if you want to do it properly.
Oh, it definitely does. And it's always a challenge finding time between playing and actually writing about the game. But I think it depends on what you like. It's just I've always found writing fun for some reason. Like literally, I think the moment I learned to write as a kid, I started keeping a diary, and it's just always stuck with me, writing down random things. It's like some sort of therapy for my brain, getting it all out of my head and writing it down somewhere. So even though it does take time, I really enjoy it, and it's, yeah, I wouldn't not want to do it.
Yeah, I actually also watched one of your videos, the one where you had the 2 versus 3 arena, because yeah, obviously I mostly am a PvPer, I guess. So I wanted to watch some of your arena healing. I'm not sure if you
Oh,
remember
no.
if you remember that game, but it was funny. Yeah, you did a commentary of like a 2 versus 3, and I think you lost one round and then you barely won, but there was no backfill. So I think it was a 2 versus 3 the whole time, which is actually quite impressive.
That sounds right. Yeah, it must have been a low B or mid B, because that's what I usually do arenas on.
Yeah, but how, like, when you play, at least based on your blog, you pretty much play all the game modes, right? So you do like PvP, PvE, story, kind of a little bit of everything.
That's fair to say. I mean, I think I am primarily a PvE person with everything that entails, so story and flashpoints and operations and so on. But I do PvP as well. I do a bit of GSF. So basically, pretty much everything that is in the game, I have at least tried at some point. And some things I like more than others, but there isn't anything where I'm like, nope, I'm never touching that. I hate it.
But you mainly play Commando, right? I mean, even the block is called Going Commando, so it's kind of in the name.
Yes and no. So Commando is my main. It was my main from day one, which is why the blog has the name Going Commando. People advise against being that specific with blog names because you never know whether you won't change your mind. But somehow I never changed my mind. Like, I started as a Commando healer. I spec'd into healing from the first talent point I got. And I've always stayed a healer. But I do play ults. Like, I do have ults of all the classes. And I guess it depends what sort of content we do. So obviously the main harder operations I only do on my Commander, really, unless the fight is really bad for that class and we need something else. But for example, PvP I do on a variety of characters of all levels.
And you mostly heal, or you play DPS tank?
I am very much a healer at heart. But I do enjoy a bit of DPS and tank as well. Though DPS is probably my least favorite role, I think.
Yeah, it's also for Commando not in the best state balance-wise. Although I think how's the Republic version actually called? Assault Specialist or something, right? The dot Commando, basically.
I am really bad with spec names, even on Republic side.
yeah. All the guides I did are basically on the imp side now, because that's why I've been playing for the last, 7 years at least. I used to be a Republic main. For you, like, do you play both sides, or because some people it's usually with the guild?
I do play both sides, but we are very much a Republic guild and Republic focused. So the Imperial side is very much the old side, which apparently makes us a minority, is the impression I get. There always seem to be more imps around in terms of progression and PvP and stuff.
Yeah, I wonder when that happened. Like, I remember in the beginning, I mean, I started playing when the game came out first. And back then, I actually started on imp side, but then I think the first guild I found was a rep guild. So yeah, I re-rolled and then was basically a rep main for a couple of years even. But then at some point, I think at least for PvPers, not sure if your experience is the same for PvE, but at least on the PvP side, at some point, most people kind of re-roll to imp side. I remember in already pretty early, maybe, 1 or 2, a couple of years in anyway, most of the players, at least that I knew, went somehow to imp side. And there was also like the thing with solo ranked back then. And I think back then, there was no cross-faction Warzones, so you would only get into the Warzone with other players of your faction, basically. So a lot of the at least ranked PvPers reroll to the imp side because they would get better teammates for arenas. But I think for other areas of the game, I get the feeling, like you said, more players also for PvE are now playing imp instead of rep. So
for the high end, at least, I'm not sure it's the same across the board. It might be that it's similar to what's in World of Warcraft. You'll find there's often a lot more casual players on Alliance side and more hardcore on Horde, and I think it might be the same thing here. It sounds a bit cliche, but it's like the more ambitious, edgy types like playing the evil characters. I don't know. I think there is some truth to it, at least.
Yeah, there might very well be. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess if someone has played the game as long as you have, then usually they will have maybe characters on both sides, right? So
Yeah, it definitely does lose some meaning over time because I mean I have ults on both sides that I enjoy playing on both sides. So it's just sort of, I guess lore wise, I like being the good guy, so I like having my home on Republic side, you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of nice actually how the game has set it up, like compared to WoW, for example, right? Because basically all the classes are mirrored, right? So you can, you know, if you want to play kind of warrior archetype, you can play a guardian or you can play a juggernaut. It's basically the same thing, which I think is actually kind of cool. And you get the same, you know, the specs with the same abilities just on both sides with a kind of different flair. Whereas I think in WoW, for example, you had, you know, some classes that were Alliance exclusive, I think, right? Wasn't there like Paladins back then? You could only play on Alliance side or something like this.
At the beginning, yeah. I always thought that was very clever from SWTOR in terms of balance. Also, that they did have the same faction Warzone from the beginning. You know, that if you had lots of imps and no Republic players, for example, that the imps could play hardball against each other, which was obviously not ideal if they were just playing hardball against each other all day, but it was an option at least.
Yeah, and then at some point they made it so you can also be matched with reps, for example, right? So so let's say if there's whatever you're playing Republic side, there's not enough rep players. I guess especially in the like the lowbies, right? The below level 80 Warzones. If there's not enough players sometimes, then they just combine players from rep and imp side, which is cool, which I like. Like, do you play a lot of lowbies as well?
Yes, actually, I am very fond of low B and mid B. I mean, I do play at level 80 as well. But for example, arenas I only do in the lower brackets because I found them to be too sweaty at max level, as in people get quite can get quite toxic quite quickly. And I'm not saying people can't be toxic in Warzones as well, but usually there it's stuff like, you all suck, go uninstall, which is, you know, like a man yelling at the cloud. You don't really care that much. But in arenas, people go like, oh, you are the shittiest healer ever. And it's like, especially if you're not actually that confident in yourself, it does kind of suck. And you're like, well, maybe I'm going to do something else, right?
Sure.
But I do kind of enjoy the arena gameplay in small amounts. So I do like doing them in the lower brackets because it's less sweaty. But also I kind of, as a more casual player, to be honest, I do enjoy that it's a bit easier there, because obviously the low B bracket is very, very simple because people don't have that many abilities. Mid B is a step up, but still most people don't have all their abilities yet. So it's not as complex as when you get to max level and people have all these cooldowns and speed buffs and counters and everything you have to keep in mind. It's much more simple when people don't have quite so many buttons.
Yeah, it used to be, I think, a very good way for like learning if you want to get into PvP, for example.
It still is. It's really amazing. I think you mentioned in a previous episode that you didn't play on the Shevisla server. Did I remember that right?
Not yet, no. Yeah.
So I rolled a character there at launch, and I swear the first 2 weeks were like some of the best fun I had in PvP ever in SWTOR, because everyone was low level and pops were nonstop. I think it took me 20 levels to even get off the starter planet because I was just constantly, I was like, I'm going to do a quest. Oh, there's a new Warzone. Off I go. And it was basically everyone was like level 20 and just, slugging it out. There were no twinks. Nobody had any great gear. It was just pure basic fun.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. And it lasted for about 2 weeks. And then it started to slow down. It was still fun for like another month or so. And then it just stopped as people went back to their main servers or did other things or whatever. And now PvP on that server is almost dead, I think, which is very sad to me because it was so much fun when I started.
Yeah, that's what I heard. And now I almost regret that I didn't try to try it out on that server. Actually, it sounds a little bit like when the game first launched. Like,
it was definitely a bit like that. It was great because I think there is something to that when everyone is new and just learning as you go. Because I mean, the way I got into PvP in SWTOR was kind of organic like that. I mean, I didn't start playing it because I wanted to PvP. I was just going to look at the story, right? But I guess at some point I went to the fleet and there was this mission saying, queue for Warzone. I was like, okay, let's see what this is. And I mean, I had done some battlegrounds in WoW, so I was familiar with the concept, but I wasn't a huge PvPer or anything. But I started doing the Warzones in SWTOR, and I really loved them, like especially compared to WoW. I thought there were so many things that they honestly did better. All kinds of things. So not just the gameplay, but like I love that on the loading screen for the Warzone, it actually explains to you what it's about. And at the start of the game, my loading screens are pretty long, so I had time to read all of it.
Yep.
And then when you load in, you get that voiceover, which again actually explains to you what you have to do. So you don't just stand there going, I don't know. And I love that tanks actually had a role to play with guard and taunt, so they had a purpose. So that was all great, and I thought the variety of Warzones was also cool. I mean, at launch there were only the three, obviously: Civil War, Hardball, and Void Star. But still, like Hardball, that was unlike anything I'd ever played before. I mean, people like to meme about it now, but the whole verticality aspect I thought was really cool. With knocking your enemy into a pit or jumping up somewhere. It was very dynamic, and I thought it was really neat.
Yeah, I love Hardball as well. I mean, it kind of depends, I guess, on the game. But I think as far as like Warzones go, Hardball is for sure one of the better ones. Like as you said, like the design is super cool. It's almost like a game of rugby in space somehow. And I love the fire traps. Obviously, playing PowerTech, right, pulling people into that is one of my favorite pastimes. Like, it's just something about it is fun. And it's also really cool. Like sometimes if you have a competitive game, so if both teams are actually trying, right? And nowadays, at least like in level 80 PvP, there's usually one team trying, and then maybe the other team just wants to deathmatch. But sometimes in the end, if it's like 1-1 or something like this, in the last minute, both teams will actually try, and then it's super fun. I think the design of the Warzone is cool, even though I prefer the original one much more than the Quash one, and the Wandin one is just has some performance issues.
You can have some very good games in Hardball, but its biggest problem is the desync is like the worst thing in that one with where you jump at someone but actually they're on a different floor, and then when the game catches up, it's very confusing.
Operatives rolling and then just becoming invisible is a bit annoying for sure. Also, snipers are really overpowered in Hardball, like with the triple roll they have now. First of all, they have Entrench, and like back in the day when there were ranked Warzones, with the 8v8s, there would always like be a sniper sitting in the middle with Entrench, and then people would write macros to click really fast so they could pick up the ball before anyone else, and no one would really die because both teams would have something like 2 tanks and 2 healers. But yeah, I think like for a casual game, or maybe the other day I was thinking about, maybe it could be fun to even do like a Hardball tournament or something like this. If you find some people that are interested, maybe with some custom rules, right, to avoid like some of the annoying things. I don't know. Like, I think
have you ever played the Hardball in the Stronghold, where you can build your own Hardball pit?
No, I have not actually. There's this decoration you can buy, right? The custom Hardball arena. I'm not quite sure how it's called. But
on the Rishi Stronghold, on the flying ship, basically you can set it up to be a Hardball arena, and my guild has had some fun matches in there. It doesn't function like a proper Hardball game in that it doesn't end. I think you can just keep going forever. Plus, it has also bugged out for us, where I think at one point we had 3 balls in play. But it was very manic and fun, so I can recommend it.
Hardball 3 balls sounds fun, yeah. Now, the thing about like the decoration, I just wish it was a bit better integrated, maybe, right? Because like the Hardball arena decoration that you can put up there, I think doesn't have any fire traps, or it doesn't have any of the traps, basically. Which is a bit of a shame, because that's the part I enjoy the most about Hardball. And I think there are some fire trap decorations from some Nashada event or something, right?
Yeah, I think so. But I'm not sure about that because I wasn't the one who set it up. So I'm not sure how it works exactly.
Yeah. So it felt kind of like a, kind of half-assed solution. So, I mean, the thing you can do if you want to play Hardball with some friends, right? PvP now has the challenge mode, which actually I think is a very cool addition to the game. So you can kind of just make 2 groups, and then one group challenges the other, and then you can pick the map that you want to play.
I've think I've done that with my guild once as well, where we had some sort of winter event where we did a number of different activities. And I think one of them was a challenge, hardball versus one team versus another. That was quite good as well.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, somehow shows that at least they do have some technology, right? At some point when they were thinking about PvP, there was, I think, even an announcement from one of the developers on some Discord that they would like to do like map selection for PvP. So like, yeah, you can basically filter out which maps you don't want to play, similar to how WoW does it.
I understand why people want that, but I think the game just can't afford it. To be honest, I think if anything, we almost need to have fewer queues, is my thinking, because I find it very noticeable that population has decreased at least in the lobby and mid queues. And I think that is a big danger for the game when new players come and they queue up and just nothing happens. Or then if they get a pop, they get into an arena where it's like one person versus three or something. That's a horrible first experience. And you're like, wow, PvP in this game sucks. And then they don't want to try again.
Yeah, like that I think for sure is an issue. Like I'm not a big fan when sometimes I play like during the mornings, or I play on the US servers, for example. And since I'm based in Germany, this is a big time zone difference. So those guys are still asleep mostly. And then, sometimes you can have those arenas where you're like, 2v3 or 3v4. And it's just, I mean, especially if, maybe one team has a tank and the other one doesn't, it's usually not that fun. I'm not sure about like the lobby situation, because I think I tried lobby in the last year, maybe 2 or 3 Warzones or something like this, but they were not that great. Like I'm not a big fan, like for 2 reasons. The first of all is like I think I was leveling a PowerTech, and I think I was level around like the 20s or 30s, right? And you have no abilities, like even fewer abilities than you have now. At level 80, right? You already have so many less abilities than you used to have last expansion. But at level 28, you basically have nothing. And I think they moved some of the core abilities, right, that you used to get quite early, like in the leveling process back then, which are really core to the class, for example, right? On PowerTech, the cooldown reset on Railshot, for example, is now at some point, I don't know, in the level 60s or something, right? So one of the core things that really define the class for me, you only get pretty much when you're almost done leveling, which I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah, I agree. The order in which they put some of the skills in leveling is very odd. Like one thing I noticed was also like as a stealther, I forget which one is which, but like one class gets it at like level 15 or something, and another one at level 15. Sorry, I mean the crowd control from stealth. I think on one class you get it at like level 15 and on another at 50. So it's like, why am I in stealth and can't do anything with it? So it's very random, it feels like.
Yeah, some things are random. And like for PvP, I mean, like you said, that at least for me, it used to be always the way that I would recommend a new player gets into the game, right? If they want to learn PvP, I will tell them, hey, just like normally level your character and then play some lobbies, play some mid-Bs. Because, yeah, as you said, it's maybe a little bit easier. The other players will also be new. But I think that doesn't, I mean, maybe it still works. I don't know. Based on my very limited experience, I'm not sure I would still recommend that, because, you might learn your class and play it a lot. But then when you get to max level, the gameplay changes a lot, because maybe you get that key ability only at level 68, which really changes the rotation like in a big way. And then, of course, you have level 75, you get your tacticals. So if you're playing mid-Bs, you're going to go up against players that have tacticals, which in some cases, like for example, the Juggernaut tactical, the cut to pieces one probably doubles your DPS or something, right? So it's quite crazy to play against level 75 people with, you can even use the old set bonuses from last expansion there, right? So I think for sure that they should delete, because yeah, when you said level 80, PvP is quite sweaty. I think the sweatiest people are probably the ones that play with like perfect gear at level 75.
There are some of those, yes. But I still think PvPing while leveling does teach you things. It doesn't teach you your rotation, but I think it's really good in a way that PvE isn't anymore at making you appreciate all the utility skills. I really saw that with the Juggernaut I leveled on Visla, and I was doing leveling PvP all the time. And obviously I had played the Juggernaut before, but it had been a while, and I was a bit rusty and everything. But it was really very noticeable as I was going into these say arenas at a low level. For example, I would get rooted and have nothing. I would just stand there and be like, "Oh, this is so annoying! I literally can't do anything." But that makes you look like, do I have anything that I can use in that situation, or at what level do I get something that allows me to break roots? Or another example is like healers and you not having an interrupt. I had some hilarious lobby arenas where a healer would just stand there and spam heals, and we would hit them, and nobody even had an interrupt. So we felt like proper idiots. But it really makes you appreciate that interrupt when you get it, because you're like, finally, I can stop that. And it really makes you think about those things when you really don't have to do that in PvE anymore while leveling. Because in PvE you can get away with like hitting the same 3 buttons for most of the story content, and it's just not the same.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I think I mentioned also in one of the last podcasts, at least for me, the story part of the game. Not sure how much that applies to, maybe flashpoints as well and some other things. But I remember back in the day, like the heroic quests, for example, like you could not solo them. You really needed, basically to have a 2-man group, or I think, there's a reason those quests have like the 2+ on them, right? Because you ideally want to be in a group of 2 players or more to do these heroic quests, for example, on the starter planets, right? Like I remember sometimes you would take a wrong turn and you go into this purple heroic area. And if you go a bit too far, you basically get 2 shots by the elite mobs. But yeah, if you had 2 players, you maybe used all your abilities, you could somehow get through that, but you would need to use all your abilities, right? So if maybe there's one of the mobs that can stun you, then you need to use your determination, for PowerTech. I think it's the stun break, right? Or things like this, right? You need to use your defensive cooldown, so kind of learn when is the best way to use them, right? And I'm not sure, like you said you play a lot of story, you probably have, 80 million characters at this point since you're playing since launch.
Not quite, but a few.
Would you say that the game like has gotten too easy, which kind of might make it like harder for new players to learn the game?
This is a topic I'm a bit conflicted about, because I know some people who are openly admitting like they're not really good at this sort of game, but they really like the story and they just want to see the story. And so I'm on board with story mode being easy to do just so people can see the story. But at the same time, I do admit it's a bit anticlimactic in terms of the overall experience. If you're like story-wise, you go up against this big bad and you hit them 3 times and they're defeated. It just feels wrong in a way. And obviously it does make it harder for people to transition into any other part of the game, because they are used to everything falling over in 3 hits. And then even if they want to go into even a veteran mode flashpoint, there are, if you don't have a healer, there are things in there that can kill you, right? They're suddenly just at a loss what to do, while the game used to require you to learn some things. One example I remember very well was leveling a consular, and I don't know if you ever came across this, but you have this mission on Quesh called At This Station, and that was a very interesting quest because it was solo, but it was full of mob groups that contained like multiple silvers or golds. And since as a consular back then you could only be a shadow or a sage, there was an expectation that you would have a crowd control. And that mission basically taught you to use crowd control. It was like, you cannot just AoE these, you need to go in and control one and then kill the other.
Yeah.
And people would like Google that and be like, I'm so stuck on this mission, it's so hard. And then they would figure it out or not. And I guess that's always a risk. I mean, we want people to figure it out, but for all I know, there were probably also lots of players that were just like, I give up, this is too hard. I don't know, only the devs have numbers on that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's like a double-edged sword somehow, right? Because I mean, I guess you can make it too easy where you simply, I don't know, end up pressing the same 3 buttons, and maybe those abilities that you used to get from the trainer back in the day, which now you get automatically, you don't even need to use them. But yeah, I don't know. I think at least when it comes to PvP, I think the leveling part of the game, the story doesn't really prepare you at all, and which is actually, yeah, it's one of the things I want to talk about, but yeah, maybe in a bit. Kind of the new player experience for PvP, which I think is quite bad at the moment. But maybe, but maybe just talking about before I forget, like the thought I had earlier with the map filtering. Like I know you said you're against map filtering because maybe might like ruin the queue, which I think is a fair point. But let's just say, the developers would do it anyway, because at least when it comes to PvP, they have a tendency to always do the thing that no one really asks for. So let's say they do it. What would be the Warzone, let's say the least favorite one that you filter out?
I actually don't think I would filter any of them out, because there isn't one that I really, really hate. The only thing that annoys me sometimes is that their randomizer seems to be too random. As in true randomness means that sometimes you get the same thing 5 times in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish they had some protection against that it literally cycles you a bit. Because I think WoW has that. I swear, if I PvP in WoW, I get a different map every single time. I never get the same one twice. And in SWTOR, that doesn't happen. For some reason, I always get like Ancient Hypergates 3 times in a row, or Void Stars 3 times in a row, and then not for hours. So it's kind of strange that way. That is the only thing that annoys me about these maps, to be honest. But there isn't one that I really dislike. I would say if I had to still pick a least favorite, it's probably Hypergates, maybe Void Star. The thing I don't like that much about these is that a single person making a mistake can really screw the whole match over. Like if the guy guarding the door or the pylon gets caught off guard, and it's like, I don't want to hate on that person, but still it's like, well, that's that match, right? If you get double capped at a bad point or something,
it's over.
And that feels bad, both when someone else does it and you're like, what did I do? And when it happens to you, because I mean, sometimes it does, right? You get distracted from the door and suddenly someone planted behind you. And they're like, why did I do that?
Yeah, I mean, the most annoying thing is if you actually try to defend the door and you call an incoming and no one comes, right? And you maybe don't have breaker anymore, you get CC'd, and then there's just nothing you can do on some classes at least. So it's a bit, I mean, I don't really play objectives that much these days, because sometimes it's just not fun, to be honest, because the rest of the team doesn't care anyway. Or I don't know, they're simply unable to look at the chat and look for incoming calls or something like this. I don't know. So I think the last time I really played objectives and tried to try out for wins is more than a year ago now. At this point, wow. I simply play for fun at this point, which for me it's not right. It's not only because of the YouTube thing, but I also think it's probably, if you are film yourself standing guarding a door, and sometimes there's 5 minutes where just nothing happens.
Oh yeah, well that would be a boring video.
Probably no one wants to watch that. Yeah, and it happens more than you think. Like there's some games where you can, for example, in Nowhere Coast, right? You maybe go and cap east or something, and then there will sometimes just be no one that attacks, right? Because if the enemy has west and south, there's no reason really for them to attack. Like I still see people doing it anyway, which I think in general is not the smartest strategy. If you already have 2, maybe one of them is contested, and sometimes people that die, they will respawn. They will like, oh yes, I'm gonna get the third cap. And then they lose the game that way. But yeah, you have some matches where you can be like a solo defender and there's just nothing happening, which can be a bit boring. Like I used to do it. I used to defend and play nodes a lot back in, I think it was Rise of the Hutt Cartel, right? When I played a lot of Shadow and Assassin back then, and it was fun because back then you could still find people in stealth, at least more easily, right? And you had Blackout, which increased your stealth level. So there were some mind games you could play trying to find the other defender, which was usually also an assassin or an operative. And then you could try to 1v1 them, right? But then at some point, I don't really know when they changed that. They made it so, yeah, the stealth detection is just so bad that it's almost impossible to find someone in stealth unless you're, a sniper, and they run in front of your field of vision, or you say, somehow have a stealth scan and they run into it or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's always funny when somehow I do manage to throw someone out of stealth. I'm like, wow, they must think I'm the godliest PvPer ever to have found them in their stealth, even though it was just dumb luck because I put an AoE down and they just happened to be in a bad place.
Yeah. Okay, so you would filter out one of those. And which one, like, is the one that you would pick? Like, what are your favorite Warzones?
My favorite Warzone is a very controversial one because it's Odessen Proving Grounds, which basically all my guildies also disagree with. And like most of the player base, because from what I remember, the devs made it actually less likely to pop than the other Warzones just because so many people hate it.
I think you're the first one. Yeah, I think you're the first person I talked to that says that Odessen is their favorite Warzone.
Well, the thing is, I kind of get why people don't like it because it can be hard to find a fight and the objectives can be a bit confusing. But I am someone who is all about the objectives. Maybe that is my inner PvEer. I don't mind even if I get killed 10 times and we win. I'm still happy. And Odessen, like I like that the objectives are very complex. I like that stealth is not a huge advantage, which it is in almost every other Warzone. But in Odessen is, I think, the one Warzone where it isn't because you cannot guard a node while being in stealth.
Yeah.
And I like that it's really good for tanks and healers because the rounds are so fast. So even if you're solo defending a node as a healer and several people come and try to kill you, you only have to stay alive for like a minute or something.
Yeah.
And you completely deny them the points. Even if you then die, you just respawn and go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of dynamic that I really like about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is unique for sure, like compared to all the other Warzones. It certainly has like something special to it, as you said. I don't know what they should change about it to make it a bit better. Like the thing I don't like about it, I guess, is that it's just a little bit too big. So there's a little bit too much downtime between the fights, right? Because like as a semi-professional damage farmer, I like that you have to fight over these little squares, right? So everyone that wants to control a square kind of has to stand in there. So it's actually really nice for doing a lot of damage, for doing AoE, which can be fun sometimes. And also as a healer, right? You can do some really nice numbers in Odessen. But then when the fight ends, like first of all, you have these respawns. I'm not a big fan of the respawn. Like I still try to click it every time, the wave respawn thing, even though it just respawns you after some seconds. But then, sometimes you'll spawn basically at the other end of the map, which I guess they did so, people couldn't get spawn camped so easily, which I guess makes sense, is a good thing, gives you a chance to come back if you're like losing a fight, when it kind of becomes harder to recover if you're already losing, right? And you're outnumbered in the fight. But for me, it's, like you said, hard to find a fight, and it's a bit too, I feel like Odessen is a Warzone where they should allow you to use a speeder or something, because it's quite a lot bigger than the other Warzones somehow.
Is it really bigger though, or does it just feel that way because of the tunnels? Because the tunnels mean you can't really see what people are doing, which again I actually kind of like, because it means you can kind of sneak up on people even if you're not a stealther, because they won't see you coming around the corner, and that kind of can make for fun surprise moments.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I never measured the Warzone, like trying to figure out how long it takes to walk from one end to the other. Feels like Odessen might be a bit bigger, but maybe I'm wrong.
I've never measured it either. I just think something like Alderaan feels bigger to me than Odessen. It's just very open. So.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's the openness of the space. Like you remember Alderaan when it had the speeders on the side that you could go to the side nodes?
Yep, I remember that. But I guess
you could basically never lose those nodes once you had them.
It was a fair change to get rid of those. It was a bit overpowered.
Yeah, maybe if they had something like this in Odessen, it would be more fun. Like let's say I guess it would make it even harder to capture. But the thing for example, I don't like is, let's say you're in Odessen and you just want to fight at south, and now all of a sudden the nodes that are active are the north node and you need to run all the way through the tunnel to the outside. I mean, there's always more than one active, of course, but yeah. It's just there's sometimes like, 30 seconds where you're not going to see an enemy, which is just not that fun for me. That's why I said like speeder. So maybe if you had some form of quick transport, let's say if you use the controller point or like more speed boost or something like this, right?
I guess that's another thing that's a bit unintuitive about it, that it actually benefits from people spreading out precisely because that kind of thing, because it's not good to say have everyone at south and then the round changes and everyone's north. Because in most war zones, I mean, obviously you don't want to have everyone in one spot necessarily, but you do want to kind of stay in at least two groups or something, right? But in Odessen, it's really good if everyone runs into a different corner to sort of be ready for the next round, which is counterintuitive for sure.
Yeah, I guess like from your experience playing a healer, I don't know what you think about it, but for me at least, it tends to get quite frustrating when I try to keep all my teammates alive. And then, as you said, they're splitting up into little groups. 2 of them are running here, 2 of them are running here. And you're thinking like, okay, where do you go? Who do you follow? How do you approach it like as a healer? Like, because especially in Odessen, I mean, I guess people are just going to die. But
yeah, in Odessen, I'm not that worried because, like I said, you can actually achieve things even as a healer without any DPS coming with you, because you just need to be able to stall people at a node. In other war zones, it's more of an issue to be dependent on other people you're trying to keep alive. And this does tie sort of into this other topic of healer performance in Warzone. So like I said, I'm kind of a healer at heart, and I've been maining healer for over a decade. But I did notice about a year ago or so that something was just off. Like I wasn't having as much fun, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I was just like, am I getting old? Am I just so much worse now? Why is this not working? And then I actually saw that video of yours where you were criticizing the article on Bulk about what PvP changes are needed or something.
Yeah.
And the article writer said something like, "Oh, healers need a nerf," and you were like, "No, if anything, healers need a bit of a buff." And I listened to that and I was like, huh. Maybe it's not just me then. And since then, I've kind of paid a bit more attention, and it is kind of noticeable because, on a casual level, often the sort of very basic strategy was always go kill the healer, right? I mean, I know that wasn't always true, but I've noticed people are even starting to give up on that. Like you go into an arena, and this is usually mid-B for me, but it's like, and people will just go and focus one DPS, focus the other DPS, focus the third DPS, and the healer just stands there and tries their best, but they can barely slow it down, and then they're just left there and they might as well stuck. Yeah. And I've been that healer, and I've seen it happen to the healer on the other team, and it sucks every time. I feel bad for them as well, like if my team wins.
Yep.
Because it just you feel really useless, and the whole reason you play a healer is you want to support you and help other people in a way, right? And if you just can't do anything, that's really bad. Another experience I had was, and it really stuck with me for some reason, it was an ancient Hypergates where I was in the middle with a melee from the enemy team and one from our team. They were just sort of duking it out against each other. And I was healing my guy, and I was like, well, my guy should win because he has a healer. But he actually lost. Like, he was doing so little damage, and my heals, even nonstop, could not keep him alive. And I just remember thinking, what the hell was that? What was the point of that? I should have been a DPS, and we probably would have killed him together. But me just healing the guy who wasn't that great at DPS, I guess. But still, I should have been able to keep him up, right? Because there was 2 of us. That seems like a very basic requirement, being able to out-heal one person's damage. And that there are situations like that is just crazy to me now. I mean, I don't expect to be able to out-heal like a ton of people, but like that it's possible sometimes for one person to outdo your healing is just crazy.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, you played this game for as long as I have, and I remember back then it used to be that a good healer could maybe do 1.5 to 2 times the output of a good DPS back then. So you could offset at least 1 DPS, even if they were bursting maybe, but for sure, let's say 1.5 to 2 DPS players, right? You would maybe have like yeah, if it was a good game, double the output. And then at some point, I think maybe it was, yeah, I mean, there were always outliers, right? At some point, they buffed Hatred Assassins so much that they could 1v1 a healer in like something like 10 seconds, ridiculous. And then they got nerfed the next patch, so there I guess will always be like balance outliers. But I think a big change was the introduction of dot spreads, first of all. And then, of course, later the tacticals, right? Like especially the crazy AoE ones. Because there's no way you're going to out-heal a Vengeance Juggernaut with a cut to pieces, which just basically, always has the one button rotation and can Vengeful Slam on, I think it's even on 8 people, isn't it? And you basically can just spam that ability. It does like 40k damage or something like this. So if you hit it on 8 people, it's something ridiculous that no healer in the game is going to out-heal, right? Maybe not even 2 healers. So I think that's one thing, like the inflation when it comes to damage numbers. And then I'm not sure if they actually changed so much about the healing numbers in the game, right? Like there are these, all the different base heal values and coefficients in the game that they can tweak. But it's just my subjective feeling. Like I always look at the HP pools that people have, and then at the biggest crits that you can do usually, right? And in some of the earlier expansions of the game, like the biggest hits you would have would maybe be, I guess they were pretty similar to what you can do nowadays, right? You can maybe take off, I don't know, 30 to 40% of someone's HP with like one big hit. And I think healers could do similar things, right? But nowadays it's not the case, right? Nowadays you can do, 180k hit if you're playing Engineering Sniper in PvP. And yeah, there's no healer in the game that can do like 180k heal crit, right? Like most of your big heals are going to be more, yeah, let's say in the 60k crit range, which is, how much is that? I don't know. It's like 20% of someone's HP, right? So it's almost, it's less than half as powerful as what you can do. And of course, it's kind of mitigated by the fact that as healers, you have all these other tools, right? You can put like HOTS on people or the Call to Shells for Commando Mercenary, which kind of absorbs some damage that way. But still, I think like somewhere at some point in the game's history, that balance has gotten a little bit off track. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't main healer. I have pretty much mained tank and then DPS for, the better part of, I don't know. I guess it's 11 years now as well. Or more, maybe. Yeah, more actually. Crazy. But yeah, I think the buff that healers need, not sure what you think they should do. For me, it's like it always feels pretty good to play healer if there's a lot of damage over time going on, right? That for me feels kind of good because you can try to keep the HOTS on everybody and you can do some good numbers still as a healer. But yeah, if there's a lot of burst in the game, I mean, especially when you're playing operative, like I did the operative guide some weeks ago, and it was exactly that situation that you described, right? Like you try to keep your HOTS on everybody, someone runs out of range, and then they just get one shot because they maybe, I don't know, didn't know they had defensive cooldowns. But even as a commando, I think, yeah, you can keep yourself alive because you have good cooldowns, right? But if there's something like, two power attacks focusing one of your DPS friends, then they're just going to explode and there's not much you can do, right? It's even probably better if you try to CC one of them, because maybe that takes more damage away than if you actually try to heal your teammate, which I think is not how it should be. So maybe if they would give healers the option, maybe via, I don't know, a tactical or just some number changes to do like a little bit more single target burst, I think that would be good for the game, for healers especially. Not sure.
Yeah, I mean that sounds quite good. To be honest, I've never been that good with the theory crafting details of the game. I've not been that invested in that, so I am not sure what the solution is myself. It's just that basically I've been playing healers since the game's launch, and obviously class balance changes. And I remember very well commandos being complete rubbish in PvP at launch. It was always like if Sage or Scoundrel, and nobody wanted to be a commando because he would just get locked down 24/7.
Yeah.
But I had ults and I would just go on a different character. But this is literally the first time I remember where it's like all the healers feel a bit insufficient. And to be clear, it's not always like that, because obviously not everyone you'll meet in a random Warzone is actually gonna be, a pro player. And if they're just doing mediocre damage, then you can counter that to some degree. But still, you do get those situations where you're just like, "What? Why am I here?" This is such a weird position to be in, where I've actually found myself playing more DPS characters just because it feels like I'm actually doing something with them, even if I'm not that great at DPS either. I mean, you mentioned Vengeance Juggernaut, and like you say, I fully admit I am not an amazing PvPer, but that is so easy. Like you go and jump in front of the door in Void Star and just spam that smash button, and the numbers fly and people die because it's so much damage, even if you don't do anything special. And yeah, you will also get focused in turn, obviously, if people have pay any attention, because they'll be like, okay, this person needs to go away. But you do get to have some fun, even if the match is a loss. You get to see some big numbers, you get some kills and so on. But as a healer, that fun is kind of missing sometimes now, because regardless of whether you win or lose, it often feels like you just can't make enough of a difference.
Yeah. How would you describe a good Warzone as a healer? Like, what's fun? Like you mentioned, sure, you try to save people. Is it saving someone at 1% HP, or is it keeping everyone at 100%? Like, I
think my favorite moments as a healer in a Warzone is when there is you join, say, a tough battle around a node, say the southern bunker in Nowhere Coast or something, and you see people are going down and they're close to dying on both sides, and you manage to top your team up just enough that they manage to now win. So basically, when your heals are just enough to turn the tide in a fight that is going on, that feels really good. And I mean, I know there are some balancing concerns around some of the bad things we had with heals in the past was obviously when every match would just sort of degenerate into a big ball of people spamming AoE DPS, and healers would spam the AoE heals, and nobody would die, and that's kind of boring as well, right? So obviously you do need to find a balance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for sure not for just overbuffing healers. Like, I wouldn't simply go and say, okay, every healer is now going to do twice the HPS than they're doing before, right? I think that would not be very fun, especially because of how strong tanks are as well. Like, I think they buffed the damage of pretty much all of the tank specs in one of the 7-something patches. Don't quite remember which one it was, but yeah, tanks are doing a lot of damage right now, and of course, they have the free tanky stats from just being specced into that combat style. And if you pair that with now healers that do twice the output, then basically you couldn't kill those guys anymore at all, really. Because as soon as you have a guard as a healer, maybe not so much for commando, but for sure if you're playing Sage or Operative, makes a huge difference, I think, right? If you have a guard, because that's really the best tool in the game, I think, at countering burst damage. And
guard is amazing, and I always feel the love for every person who guards me, and I'm always surprised how little people use it. I mean, maybe there just aren't that many tanks in Warzones nowadays, but I am often surprised by
there are a lot of tanks, at least in my Warzones. There are a lot of tanks.
Or maybe they all just come with their friends, and then the friends get the guard. But I find I very rarely get a guard as solo queuing nowadays, even as a healer.
Yeah. When I play healer, I will always spam my heals on everyone before the Warzone, just to make sure that my name is on their screen if they have that if they have that active, and hoping to get a guard. And sometimes it works, I guess. Yeah, sometimes you find a tank, and then if you're lucky, he will put the guard button, and then you need to make sure that you stay close to them. And but yeah, the times that you find a tank who actually swaps the guard in the perfect moment when a target is dropping low, not too soon, but also not too late, so that you can actually out heal the burst damage. That's very rare, but it's kind of a shame, because I do see a lot of people playing tank in my Warzones, but I think a lot of them are basically only using half the class. I think many people are playing it because it's quite tanky. And, if you're playing tank, you're never really going to get one shot unless you get hit by, 5 people at the same time. So I think a lot of players are playing guard because it's basically just a more durable DPS, and if you're playing like pure DPS, unless you're maybe a sorcerer who can always bubble, or maybe a mercenary, like all other classes can pretty much get one shot if they don't pay attention. And so I do understand why like new players, they maybe want to play tank, but I think especially for a new player, tank is probably, I would say, at least the hardest class to learn a PvP, yeah, because you need to be able, if you want to play it properly, you need to be able to do some damage, especially if you're going to be running like the skank tank thing that everyone is doing. But you also need to have awareness to see kind of, where are your healers. You kind of need to look at the ops frames and swap the guard ideally. You need to manage your taunts, and you need to most of all make sure that you don't die yourself, right? Because you're going to be taking all that guard damage. So I think tank is probably like the highest skill-based class in the game right now. So maybe not the best thing for new players to learn, I think.
Yeah, I think it's probably also the hardest to understand even on a basic level to begin with, because I think that's definitely something I see in say the lowly bracket when you get the tank. I mean, I think it takes a little while until you have all your tanky abilities. But I see people that queue as tank and they don't use guard. They don't even taunt once. I'm like, I can taunt as a DPS. Why don't you hit your taunt? So why are you even a tank? You're not using any of the tanky abilities you have. But I'm like, maybe they don't even understand how these work in PvP because it's not super obvious if you're only just starting out, I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing I actually wanted to hear your opinion about, because the new player experience, you said it's quite good when you get into a Warzone, you get the loading screen and so on, right? That maybe other games are not doing. But I feel when it comes to how the game mechanics work, how some of the classes maybe and the abilities are a bit different in PvP compared to other game modes, it's not that, I think is there even a tutorial for PvP at that point? I'm not sure. I think there are some missions and there's some in-game menu where you do get some form of tutorial. To be honest, I haven't looked at it in a while. But I feel like, yeah, as you said, many new players will maybe not even really know how guard works, right? That, it has a 30-meter range, but the effect only works in 15 meters. And I think, sure, it says so in the tooltip, but how exactly it works with the redirection, what taunts do in PvP compared to PvE, I think many players simply don't know that. And I also think the game is not really doing the best job at explaining that. So yeah, I was wondering what you think about like the new player experience. Obviously you're not a new player, but I don't know, maybe in your guild you have some new players, and
I think it's tough in general, not just in PvP. I watched a video by Josh Strife-Hayes trying SWTOR for the first time, and I don't think he was even doing any PvP, but he very much commented on the fact that basically all the help was, here is a text pop-up that you're probably not going to read. And it's like, it doesn't really tell you anything otherwise. And it's hard because the game has so many more systems now than it had at launch. At launch, there weren't that many things going on. And at launch, they tried to have more little quests to introduce you to things like, how to mod your gear and things like that. And even those were extremely basic, to be honest. And since then, they've only added more things like augments and strongholds and GSF and 100 little things that you might encounter while leveling up without any sort of explanation. So I think that's not a problem unique to PvP, to be honest, that people don't understand what's going on, because there is just too much going on and the game doesn't explain it very well.
I think that's true, yeah. I notice a lot when I try to, for example, make a guide on how gearing works, right? Like the fastest way to gear for PvP or something. And like the first one I did, I thought, I had it down, and it was pretty much, I tried to make it as short as possible without leaving out, any of the any important things, kind of, because there's a lot of guides. Maybe they don't need to be half an hour long, so I try to keep it around 15 minutes, right? But the questions that people were asking, I would have never anticipated, right? Like very basic things, like, right, like how do I augment an item or something, or things like this, right? Like how do I can only buy the 326 implant, but you said I have to buy the 340 implant, right? So kind of just the basic concept that you need to, go to the vendor and you trade in the 326 for the 328 and the 330. Like I get these questions all the time, right? So I think like there's a lot of systems which maybe, playing this game for so many years, I've just gotten used to, and they're kind of my baseline expectation now. But they might not be as intuitive as I think for new players, for example. So that's something.
We actually had a bit of an advantage there as long time players, because when we started, there wasn't that much going on, and then every new feature was introduced one at a time, and we had time to get used to it. Well, now it's everything all at once. I mean, thinking back, I think part of the reason why I did a lot of PvP at launch was because there just wasn't that much else to do, now that I think back to it. Because I mean, okay, I did flashpoints with friends sometimes, and I did operations with my guild once I hit max level, but that was like twice a week or something. And the rest of the time, I was just like, I guess I'll queue for PvP. So I actually did a lot more PvP in the early days of the game than I do nowadays, I think, because there are just so many different activities that divide my attention between them. So yeah. I actually don't do as much PvP now as I used to.
Yeah, I mean, there was only one operation at launch, right? There was only the Eternity Vault, and then Karaga's Palace came later. And I remember like running flashpoints all the time. I think on website it's called the SLs, right? The first one?
The SLS, yeah.
SLS or something like that, yeah. Yeah, I remember running that one, but I don't even remember exactly how many flashpoints there were at the beginning. I remember leveling to Illum, and then there was the huge world PvP thing going on there, which was like a huge lag fest.
Did you actually get to take part in that? Because I was a slow leveler, so it was already like gone by the time I hit max level, so I never saw it for myself.
Yeah, me too. I went there at some point after I hit level 50, but back then it took so long to level, right? And I was a story player back then. Like I basically just started the game because I liked the original KOTOR games a lot. So, I didn't spacebar through anything. I looked at all the dialogues and tried to make the decisions that were somehow interesting with my character, right? Which back then was like a, level 18 edgelord, dark side Sith assassin. And then at some point later, I rerolled to rep side. But initially, I played all the story. And also I think it was quite slow. I don't know exactly when I hit level 50 and like how many weeks it really took. But yeah, no, I was not, especially back then, I wasn't even a PvPer at all. I'd never played any PvP. But I started to get into it a little bit. Like I played some Warzones. I really liked Hardball, for example. And back then, the best gear in the game, I think, came from these like random loot boxes. But I think it was also gated behind the level 60 Valor rank, right? So you needed to get, Battle Master, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Valor 60, and otherwise you couldn't equip that gear or something. I don't remember fully how it worked, but I think one of the reasons that so many people were doing Illum is because you could get, the level 100 Valor very quickly. There was some, I don't know what exploit going on. I'm not sure what. They fixed it pretty quickly. So by the time I learned about what Illum even was, I think that was already gone. But I did take part afterwards in some of the like open world battles there, which was just, back then playing on a laptop. When 2000 something, it was I think even worse performance than it's now. So it was like, yeah, there was not much PvP going on there. It was mostly like pressing random buttons because you had a 50 versus 50 open world PvP battle going on. So it was, yeah, unfortunately the game engine I think was not really made for that scale of PvP.
Did you play on a PvP server or on a PvE server back then?
I think I started on a PvP server. It was the German server called Jarkai Sword. And I think that was a PvP server. I'm not 100% sure right now, but I remember getting ganked a couple of times, so I guess it must have been.
Yeah, that must have been then.
Yeah, it must have been. Yeah, and I don't really know why, to be honest, because like I said, I never played PvP and I never really was planning to play PvP. I just played like with my friends, and we wanted to play through the story basically, and then wanted to get into some raiding and so on. So this was actually the first thing I did, some flashpoints and then the first operation. And cleared that at some point. And as you said, then there was not so much you could do in the game because, there were no uprisings or something like this back then. There was no, I think there were very limited number of flashpoints at the time of release, right? And at the beginning, then it was pretty much only, there was no other story content. So what you could do was, level an alt, which I did. And my second character was a sorcerer. And then I became a sorcerer main for a while. They were also quite strong back then. And then I started playing PvP with a sorcerer. Like that was the first thing I think where I started to play a bit more seriously and started enjoying it. But yeah, there was not so much to do back then. So once you cleared the raid, basically the only thing you could do was either like try a different game mode or maybe try a different class. And I guess there was maybe one of the aspects that caused some of the well, I guess a lot of the players to quit, right? Not enough end game in the beginning.
Yeah, that was definitely, I think. I remember there weren't even any real dailies. Like they made some of the quests on Belsavis and Ilum repeatable, even though they weren't meant to be. And that was our dailies at the time, which was kind of funny. But even those you didn't really need to do very often. I think I did like Belsavis a couple times because it also gave purple mods at the time, I think. But basically, once you had your gear, you didn't have to go back necessarily. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of it. And yeah, the end game focused players were not very happy with SWTOR. I just never understood that because I thought it was quite obvious that it was meant to be a game where you played some olds. So I didn't really understand why people would play one character and then complain about being bored. So I never really had that issue. I just made characters of all the classes, and to this day, I like taking a lot of them to the new story because the devs actually do try to make some differences. I mean, it is the same basic story, but there are little bits that are different depending on your class, and I always like finding those little Easter eggs.
Yeah, me too. When it comes to like the alts thing, I also like to try all the different classes which are in different games. There, of course, after playing games for a very long time, I know there are some classes that are like more than others, and I think a lot of the games they are repeating, stuff that someone thought about maybe 10, 20 years ago, like the classic archetypes, right? You have like a warrior type and an archer type, and there's a stealth, roguish kind of type that I like a lot. But yeah, I don't know. In this game, I mean, I guess now with the combat styles, they kind of reduce the numbers of alts that you need, like by half, basically. I still enjoy. I mean, every time there's a new expansion, I level them, all of them up anyway, except for the last expansion. So now I still have, I think I have, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, which are like stuck at the last time I played, like level 70, 75. I think it was level 70 actually, because I took a break before Onslaught. So a lot of my characters on the website are stuck at level 70 and will probably never get played again, because now I can play a Sentinel, for example, on the imp side. But I think it's nice. I mean, I think that was a good change, personally. I think like the combat style things, even though I understood it a bit differently in the beginning when they announced it, because I thought you could like in the first announcement they did, I'm not sure if you remember that there was some talk about that you could basically mix your classes somehow, right? So maybe you could be, could combine half of the talents of an assassin with a PowerTech, for example, or something like that. But I think there was just a miscommunication. That probably was never the plan.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing anything like that, but I do remember there was some confusion about what exactly was going to mean. So that some people were confused for sure.
I think that would be fun. I mean, if I could design my perfect class in the game, I always wanted to have a PowerTech with either stealth, or the second thing that I would like would be like a PowerTech that can use, the death from above from Mercenary, right? Where you like fly up into the air, which I think is one of the coolest animation in the game. I think if PowerTech could have something like that, a little bit like the Demon Hunter has in Warcraft, as an escape tool, that would be cool. Because, yeah, as PowerTech sometimes in PvP and I guess also in PvE, like once you jump in and you used your hydraulics, then it's 35 seconds of hydraulics cooldown until you can get back out, and then in the meantime you get rooted and stunned. So pretty much once you're committed, and there's not really an escape for you as a melee. So I always wanted to have like a PowerTech that can fly out or something, or stealth out. That'd be my perfect class.
It sounds a little OP, to be honest.
Absolutely, yeah. But it's my dream game that we're talking about, so it can be.
But I mean, to be fair, they have opened the door now to create new combat styles if they wanted to. Because I mean, in the past, I can understand why the game never added a new class, since every class has, you know, unique story, unique voice actors, and so on. But now that they separated those things, they could just introduce a new combat style that, you know, works on the existing classes, but just have different fights. I don't know if that's something they are working on, but it's something they could do if they wanted.
I'm a little bit disappointed actually that they never introduced a new class to the game in over 10 years, you know. I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity. And I mean, I understand probably why, right? Because it's quite a complex thing, and then you would need to create story quests for the class, right? For the new class, all the way from level 1 to level 50. Although I guess not really, because maybe you could also say that class just starts at level 50, right? Like the what's it called, Death Knight in WoW experience, right? Where you get you start already with some more abilities, or maybe even at a higher level, I think.
True, like you could be some, say, I don't know, as a cool knight who starts after the Knights of Expansion or something, I guess.
For example, right? That would make it easier, at least on the voice acting budget.
But they would still probably need new voice actors, and I don't think that's an area where they want to add to their work at the moment.
You know what they should do? They should make it like an AI-based class, right? Which is like some digital entity or some kind of force spirit. I don't know how they're going to call the class. I
mean, it's a funny idea, but I think that's not really what most people come to the game for. To be, I don't know, a droid that beeps and boops.
You think so? I mean, I would probably try that. Maybe not necessarily does have to be a beeping and booping, but I always thought like, I mean, that's not really a class thing, right? But even just like the playable species in the game, they're all kind of humanoids, right? Which I guess also is probably like a technical thing, right? Because of how the game is coded, would be probably pretty difficult to have, you know, playing as a hut or something. But for me, I think like the Star Wars universe has so many species, right? Why can I not play as how are they called? Like the Genosian, these like bug people. Why can I not play, you know, as a claw slug if I want to, right? It's maybe a bit.
It's because they need to be able to make a kissing animation with your companion. And if you can't kiss your companion, you can't be that.
Oh God! So have you tried some of the new like date night missions? I'm still not still refusing to try any of those. I'm not a big fan.
I've done Terran and Archon, but with the others, I don't actually have access to them at the moment, because even though I have a lot of alts, I haven't actually done a lot of romances on those, so I would have to level new characters or all the story to actually, say, be romantically involved with Vet or whatever, and then see the one new mission. I guess it's a long-term goal to work on, but yeah, at the moment I haven't seen a lot of them.
Yeah. So how does it work? Like you have the companion, and I think at some point you lost them, right? In one of the expansions, wasn't it also like the Eternal Throne or the Fallen Empire, where you lost a lot of companions and then you needed to somehow recover them?
Yeah, I still think that was a big mistake. I think they completely underestimated how much it would piss people off. Like, to be honest, it surprised me to some degree, because I liked my companions, but I wasn't as emotionally attached or anything. But people were really like, where is my wife? Why can't I? why can't I speak to my wife? Why am I not going to find my wife? Why am I wasting time with this Archon guy? And people were really, really annoyed with that. And then it took them a really long time to bring some of those companions back. So
yeah, that's interesting. But I guess it taught them something, right? It taught them that some players are mostly playing the game for the companions, in fact, or at least, you know, partially for the companions.
Yeah, that is a huge thing. And to be honest, that is a question from me to you, I guess. How do you reconcile being so into PvP and playing SWTOR for the PvP when you know it's not really a priority for the dev and the majority of players?
How do I reconcile? Well, I don't really. I mean, I never really think about it. It's, to be honest, like I think after playing it for so many years, and even though I think I took like a longer break for some years, right? In exactly that area when it was like the Fallen Empire and Eternal Throne era, which also was kind of a low when it comes to PvP. And then I think afterwards it had a little, like another little peak and was actually quite active. And I kind of missed that and then started again in 6.3. But I think at this point I have to admit that I probably have some kind of issues being a PvPer in this game after so many years. There must be something wrong with me, because as you said, there's not really that many good reasons to keep playing it and to think that at some point it's gonna get better, or even like just fulfill the potential that I think it has as a game, right? Because I mean, I think, like you said, the core mechanics of it are really fun, and I still haven't found another PvP game that I would rather play is the real answer to it, right? Played some WoW. I started too late, unfortunately. I think I only started around like Pandaria. Stopped pretty quickly there, and then I played a bunch of Shadowlands, but also not at the beginning of the expansion. So I don't know, my WoW timing is somehow never the best. And I like that game. I mean, obviously it's for PvP. I think a much better game with, developers that look more about the balance, and there's just a bigger population, cross-server queuing, and so on. All of these things that, Star Wars is dearly missing, I would say. But at the same time, there's something about it that just doesn't speak to me as much as Star Wars does. Don't really know what it is, right? I mean, I kind of like the balance of the game with guard being a thing, for example. I mean, I did main tank for many years. So I kind of like having that possibility. I mean, I guess in the beginning, I just like also the animations, the sounds, the look and feel, I think is also very important, right? Is because there's many other games that, have similar concepts of, tank, healer, DPS, and so on. But they just don't feel the same, right? Just the sound when you click the buttons, and how the animations kind of feel, how the character looks. And all of that, I just really like this game. Still do so many years after. Even though obviously, there's many, many things wrong with it. Performance being a big one, and lack of balance. I think probably, I don't know if any of the developers even still play PvP, or at least not all that much. Which is kind of a shame, because I think for me the game is really fun. But to be honest, there's only at this point there's only two explanations. Either I'm mentally not quite right, or option two is, and this I mostly play it as a social activity at this point, right? Because I play this game for so long that now I have friends in the game, and it's just fun for me to play. Like, even if the game is, maybe not as fun as it used to be many years ago, and there's not many, there's not even an expansion right now at the horizon to look forward to. It's just kind of my way of de-stressing after a long day at work or something, right? So that's probably it. Maybe it's a bit of both.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. And to be honest, I think many operations players are in a similar kind of boat, that just enjoy doing that stuff with friends, and even if there isn't a new one for many years. But the devs have kind of neglected it for longer than usual, I guess. I find. I mean, basically, if you do ops or PvP in this game, you have to accept that it's not the focus and that you're not going to get attention that often. But in the past, at least you would get something every other year or so, right?
Yeah.
But right now, it has been a really long time since they added to any of those things, and that is definitely noticeable. And it's definitely tricky, because I understand why they focus on the story stuff, because that is kind of the game's main selling point, and presume that it also makes some money, in the sense that people are more likely to come back to check out the new story, and then they buy an outfit from the store so they look cool in the cutscene, that kind of thing, as opposed to, I don't know, 5% of people doing ops or whatever. Don't know what the percentage is for PvP, but probably also low compared to the overall.
Yeah.
But I hope they can find something to do. So for operations, I think there's meant to be at least one boss in the next patch, whenever that's gonna be. But I don't know what they're planning to do for PvP. They just seem to be relying on the seasons now, and I'm not sure that's entirely the way to go either, to be honest.
What do you think about the seasons? I know you wrote some blog posts about like your experience with it, but what are your what's been your experience so far? Like how would you maybe improve them in a way?
I'm not sure how I would improve them. The thing is, I feel like seasons kind of work to appeal to more casual and PvE players like me, because basically they introduce, you could say, almost a PvE element where it's like, do this thing and you get a reward, like it's a quest. And that does just work on people who do PvE. And I mean, I've spoken to some players who were like, oh, I didn't really used to do PvP, but now that there's a season, I do it. So there is clearly some there is some aspect to it that works, but I worry a bit that it's too focused on FOMO and rewards, because ultimately it still doesn't make PvP more fun or make it easier for people to understand. Like, because if you're at level 80 and you're like, oh, there's a season, and I'm going to queue for PvP, even though I've never done a PvP match before, you're probably still going to have a bad time. I think what's more important is to make sure that people have a good introduction to PvP, and that there are a lot of queue pops, so they can have matches that are full and they don't have to wait too long, and just make sure that it's fun without even the rewards. And yeah, and with the FOMO, I don't know, this is something that's been bugging me. I don't know how much you noticed, but with 7.0, they made it so that dailies reset every day and weeklies reset every week. Originally, that was, I think, because they wanted people to only do certain daily areas every week or whatever, which they've gone back on. So I don't know why they kept this change. But it means that you have to always complete certain things on the day, and I kind of hate that because I like getting the reward for the daily and the weekly missions, right? But it's like, say I am on a losing streak, and it's like I need to get one more match, so I complete this mission now. I can't be like, ugh, well, yeah, it's kind of rubbish today. I'll come back tomorrow, and I'll complete the quest tomorrow, and I'll still get something for it. Kind of, if you want the reward, you have to do it today, or you have to do it this week, even if the wait times are really long, even if you're losing every single match in a row. And that's just kind of frustrating. And I think that makes the experience worse in a way when it didn't used to be like that. Because I used to have like a dozen incomplete PvP weeklies on across all my characters, because I would just play a little when I felt like it and then come back to it later. But now there's always this pressure of completing it in time before the reset. Same with the PvP seasons objectives, to be honest, because if you want to fill out your bar, you need to do some of those objectives. And if you just can't get a win, you have to keep trying until you get that win before it resets. And that's not great, I think.
I would have never thought about that, to be honest. So that's why I wanted to talk to you, because like my perspective is so different from yours. Because I pretty much only play PvP, right? I mean, obviously sometimes I play something just because I want to make a guide on it. So maybe I run some flashpoints because that's the fastest way of gearing. But otherwise, I pretty much, 90% of my time is basically only spent playing PowerTech and only PvP. So I never run into these issues because I always finish the weeklies, even though maybe I don't try so much, just because of the amounts of games that I play, right? Only on pretty much one or two characters. That I pretty much finished them after a couple of days anyway. So that was not an issue that I would have ever thought about. And the other one with the PvP seasons, I mean, I wonder what you think about that. But from my perspective, I never, to be honest, I maybe look at the rewards when they announce them. But yeah, the last ones have been so underwhelming. Like, just again, another space pirate outfit. Maybe like the ninja one was kind of cool, I guess. But I look at the rewards once, and then I don't look at them anymore. Like, they don't change the way I play at all. I really like not playing the game because of the rewards, just because, like I said, like as a social activity and because it's fun, right? But for me, like the battle pass, they could put more adrenals on there or whatever. They could put...
Oh no, don't encourage them.
They could put like claw slug egg decorations on there. It wouldn't change anything for me. Like, I don't know. I mean... Which is it's a bit of a shame, because I think that the system in itself is not bad, right? Like I see the point that, you want to have some system that maybe, keeps people engaged, and especially for more casual players that maybe not as hopeless cases as I am, totally stuck on PvP in this game, but that maybe to motivate them to queue up for Warzones, right? And have something to work towards. But I think the way it's implemented, unfortunately, it's not the best. Because, first of all, the rewards could be better, at least in my opinion. Because as a PvPer, I don't need 5 adrenals, right? Like I already have 5,000, and anyway.
That was pretty much offensive. Like, because I vended them and they sold for, I think, 29 credits or something. And I was like, you could have just left that level empty and it would have felt less bad.
Yeah, I put some credits there or something, right? Like everyone in the game needs credits. They just removed a lot of the credit seller credits from the game, trying to fix some of the inflation, which I think was good. But, as a PvPer, for example, I don't have time for crafting. I never really do anything else that could bring me a lot of credits. So most of the, maybe not most, but I know a lot of PvPers, let's say, who are sometimes struggling with credits. So, you could have put some credits in there, for example, right? Throw the PvP as a bone or something, but not adrenals, man. Come on. Don't need
to be honest,
that's the one thing I have.
I don't actually care that much about the rewards either, which might be funny. But I think there's this one armor set which I bought multiple copies of. Or was it Resourceful Renegade? Because I think it looks really cool. It's from the PvP Seasons vendor. But other than that, I don't really care that much either. I just claim them and then put them away and don't end up using a lot of them. I just like filling up bars. It might sound really stupid, but I like leveling and filling my level bar. I like doing conquest and filling my conquest bar, and the PvP season is the same sort of thing. It's like I like doing the PvP and filling my PvP bar. It's really basic, but it kind of works on my brain somehow.
Yeah, sure. It's the completionist approach, right? Like you have someone give me a task so I can complete it, right? No matter what the task is.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense to me. I get that. But I think still can be a better way to spend your time to complete a task that, just doing the task itself is enjoyable, right? So if there's something that you need to do that's actually fun, you're going to have a better time, right? You're going to be more likely to succeed at something, right? It's kind of the thing, like, do we do the things we're naturally good at, or do we get good at the things that we just like to do somehow, right?
There's definitely a balance there to achieve, and I feel like the PvP seasons are sort of too focused on just the rewards. Because with other aspects of the game, I feel they did well in the past with giving rewards for PvP. Like I feel like the daily and weekly missions, for example, they're pretty decent for getting tech fragments. And it's like they're not the best way to get tech fragments fast, but they are pretty solid. So you don't feel like you have to PvP to get tech fragments. But if you do like to PvP sometimes, it's a good way to get more tech fragments. And same thing with Conquest. Like there's like 100 different things you can do for Conquest. But doing PvP is pretty good. So there is some incentive to do it there, but you don't feel like you have to do it if you absolutely hate it. But it's an attractive option. I just feel like with the seasons, it's just too much like do this now and then get a prize, and it feels a bit empty to me. I think it's more important that they just make the game more fun. Because as I mentioned earlier, to get back to that what I said about queues and populations, because since Galactic Season 2, I've been playing a little bit on all the servers, and it's just so noticeable, and it's scary. So Starforge is fine, Darth Malgus is fine, but on some of the other servers, the population in PvP has died down so much. Like Leviathan, for example. Obviously, I made my first character in Season 2, so I queued for lobby PvP, and pops there were not great even then, but I did get some. And at this point, I have several new lobbies on Leviathan that still have the introduction to PvP mission in their log, because I've never had a pop, even though I queue them every time I log on to do quests, and they just never see a single pop. And that is worrying to me, because presumably there's still some PvP at max level, but that goes back to the whole people will just think it's not there or it's not good, and because if you're casual and you just try to queue and you never get the pop, you'll probably just forget about it at some point. You'll be like, oh, I guess PvP doesn't happen here. Never mind. Yep. Let's do something else. And I actually do think that is the biggest risk for the game right now, that these queues die out and give people a bad impression. And I do feel like there's been a bit of a narrowing down of the population to just the more hardcore PvPers. I noticed that the first time, I think, when I queued into a Warzone without augments, and I mean, I'm sure that makes you cringe with considering how important they are. But to be fair, like when I started, I was like, well, I don't mind having slightly worse gear. I have like a lot of ults, and I don't necessarily want to, constantly send gear back and forth. I'm augmented on my main and on some of the most played ults, but not on every single ult, and I don't want to worry about the gear. Sometimes I just want to, like, I'm playing an ult and I'm like, oh, I'll queue for a Warzone right now and do the one Warzone. And I figured, well, but I'm at max item level or something, so who cares if I don't have augments? And I look at the ops frames and I'm like, I have 25% less health than anyone else in the group. And I'm like, oh my God. It's like I painted a target over my head. Everyone will see this is like the one person with less than 400k health. Get him.
Yeah.
So
especially if you're playing healer, yeah.
And I'm noticing that basically I am often the only person without augments, and that tells me that the only people queuing are people who are very prepared for PvP. Because, I mean, you said yourself, like, people sometimes don't even know what augments are, right? So there are no people here who are just casually leveled up and, like, oh, I'm going to try PvP today. These are all people who know what PvP is about and they own a PvP. And there's very few casual players who just, are here for the first time or having some fun. Mm-hmm. And that does make me worried a little, because I feel like the game mode always needs fresh blood to be sustainable, because sooner or later some people drop out, and you always need newcomers to keep things going.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that one. I think on Darth Malgus, it is maybe even more like I see the same names all the time, right? And people will come, they will go. Some people will take a break and then come back. Sometimes even months later, right? You will have someone quit, and then you're like, still have them in the friend list, and then they pop up a few months later, right? So the game has a way to kind of pull you back in when there's another update, or you just think, oh, I used to play Star Wars. Oh, it was fun back then. One of your friends said, hey, should we play Star Wars again? And then it's 2 years later, and you have a podcast and YouTube channel, and you're sitting here and talking about this game from 13 years ago. It has a way of happening, but for sure on the new player side, I think on Darth Malgus, especially, there's a lot of players that have been playing this game for a long time, and it shows. I sometimes still get people in the game that have, maybe gear from a previous expansion, and that is quite punishing because they, remove the bolster for that gear, and they're actually nerfing it because there was some gear. Yeah, some exploits in the past that people were using to get better stats than what they were supposed to be, and some of that involved old gear. And so the way that they went about fixing it is basically just nerfing like every gear with item rating lower than, I think it's, 318 or 324 or something like this, right? So if you have gear that's basically worse than the conquest gear you get from the current expansion, you get your stats like hard nerfed. And so if you're maybe like a returning player and you have the best gear from the last expansion, which was 306, right? Like, you're going to be trash now in PvP because your set bonus doesn't work anymore. It doesn't do anything. You don't have the legendary implants yet, which also are usually not the biggest performance boost, but especially the ones that give you crit matter a lot. And if you don't have those, maybe you have a tactical, that's great. But if you then also don't have augments, you're going to be missing 30% of your stats. Worst case, maybe not quite as much, but yeah, maybe. I mean, I've seen some people with, less than 300,000 HP in one of my recent games with like really, really bad gear.
That is really crazy to me that they're not bolstering for augments. Because I mean, bolster shouldn't replace gearing, but I always thought it was really good that they try to get everyone to a certain baseline, and at the moment it feels kind of weak, to be honest.
Yeah, I think they should go back to what they had in the past, where maybe after you complete some PvP tutorial, where you kind of, have to play one match, or you just, you're level 80, maybe do some brief sanity checks so that you at least have a tactical equipped, and then you get your starter PvP gear, which puts you at least, gives you like a fighting chance, right? Maybe puts you at, let's say 95% of what like the perfect gear would be, right? So you still have some incentive to play and somehow upgrade your gear or min-max or whatever if you want to, but so that even like a casual player that jumps in can just kind of play the game without having to go and grind augments for a month or something, right? Because like, as a new player, I wouldn't really do that, to be honest, at this point. And I wouldn't recommend anyone that starts playing the game, especially gearing through PvP for PvP is so slow that I tell everyone that asks me, hey, I want to try PvP. I just tell them to go play flashpoints, like get the Conquest gear, play some flashpoints, get the hide and seek mods, and then that's basically already you're gonna be pretty close to like perfect gear in a day or a couple of days, right? Like not talking about augments. Augments are like a different thing, but yeah, maybe they should go back to what they had in one of the earlier expansions. I don't know, was it like partisan gear or how was it called? I forget, but there was some kind of blue gear set that you could have for PvP.
I remember the recruit gear. That was I think in the base game where it was like you got this quest, literally do one Warzone, and then you get this blue set, which marked you, still like a target. It's like, here is the noob. but you at least had some starter gear.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, some noob gear set.
But yeah, I think in general, some of those problems would also just be solved if more people were in the queue. Because obviously, if a lot of people are noobish and badly geared, then it doesn't matter as much because they can still have fair matches against each other, right? And so I've been trying to think about what could be done to increase populations in the queue, but it's really hard because obviously server mergers are not really something I like. I remember the cross-server question, they answered back in the day saying it's never going to happen. I feel like at some point we should just ask again, because back then the game had like 100 servers, right? Now we have 6. So maybe it's more possible now than it was back then.
Yeah.
maybe someone should bring it up again just to ask. Or also just reducing the number of queues. So, because I mean, in unranked, Warzones and Arena didn't used to be split. It was just one queue, and you would get one randomly, right? But now it's split in 2 queues, and then you have obviously mid B and low B, and they also split into Warzone and Arena. So I was wondering maybe you should just remove the split in the lower brackets at least to make sure all the people interested in PvP in the lower levels go into the same queue. It's tricky.
That's a tricky one, yeah, because then you have, level 10 players fresh from Korriban going up against level 75 fully decked out, sweaty, try-hard twink players.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see when is no game better than a really bad game, or when is a bad game better than just never getting any pops.
Yeah, maybe you should just do like a level 75 bracket, or somehow maybe throw the level 75s together with the level 80s, right? Because I think having a tactical is too big of an advantage compared to like not having any tactical at all. I mean, even if it's one of the classes that are not so dependent on tactical, like PowerTech, for example, like even just the 5% extra damage you get, I mean, 5%, if it's a really close match, that's the difference between winning or losing, right? So, but for other classes, it can literally double your damage, right? So
yeah, plus obviously you have those set bonuses you mentioned. I didn't even realize until the other day just how easy it is to twink in that bracket, because you can literally buy the level 75 set bonus. Not 75, the level 70 set bonus gear from a vendor for like less than 1 million credits. And then you're basically in set bonus gear. And if you put some level appropriate augments on that as well, you're just a monster.
Yeah.
you can always tell when you go into Warzone or Arena in the mid-B bracket, and there's like this one guy who just destroys everyone and does like more damage than everyone else put together, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, gear makes a big difference, and I think it's worse in those lower level brackets. I think there you also have bigger skill gaps than in level 80s, because I think like obviously if you're just learning your character, I mean, you have less abilities first of all, right? So you're already going to be at a disadvantage because of that. But then if you're still learning the class, if this really is your first character, yeah, you're going to be at a kind of a double disadvantage going up against those level 74 tryhard guys. So I think that needs to go, like the level 75 twinking. It's not really a good reason that it's in the game. I mean, I love damage farming, and I sometimes watch the videos of that guy that does like 30k DPS on a sniper in level 75 Warzones just because I think it's funny. But that's not the best, let's say, experience for new players to go up against that. So they should probably throw those in with the level 80 somehow and introduce some kind of bolster that just squishes the stats and evens it out. So, I mean, I think they do they do it a little bit in lobbies, right? If you have, because if you go into lobbies, sometimes you will not even have items in all of your slots, right? So there's probably something in place that gives you like extra HP, just so you know, if you really, because I tried queuing with a PowerTech, I think at level 10 or 12 or something, and I didn't have an earpiece or something because there was no quest reward at that point that gave me an earpiece after the first planet. But I still had relatively decent stats. Not, nearly as many abilities as I hoped. So it's really quite rough playing like a low-level PowerTech. But at least I had, proper amount of HP. So I think there is something that they're doing. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's also some boosting going on with abilities, so that like when you only have 3 abilities, those abilities hit harder than they usually would, since they don't have anything else. But I don't know how exactly the math works.
Yeah, for sure there's something like this. And I think that's why in those lower level Warzones, you also can do higher DPS than you can do in level 80, for example. Also because I think, you're hitting enemies that have lower armor rating and so on. So you can do some ridiculously big hits in those low level Warzones. But yeah, like going back to the thing you said about getting more people into the queue and to PvP is, I think, the key point, right? Because if you had more people in the queue, then you could make better matches, right? Because one of the things that people are complaining about is always like the solo versus pre-made thing in the level 80 PvP. Well, that's actually, I think, not the biggest problem. Sure, there is some things going on with, the 8-man pre-mates that they introduced in the PvP revamp that no one really asked for. And, now you have some people grouping and queuing up in 8-man groups of very experienced players. And, they'll be the only 8-man group in queue. And then, of course, they are destroying the whole queue, which kind of ruins the whole matchmaking thing.
Funnily enough, even though people talk about pre-mates a lot, that I have had 0 issues with them. I've been perpetually confused why people complain about them so much. Because I swear, ever since they introduced the 8-man queue, I've maybe been in 2 matches where I was like, oh yeah, this is a pre-mate. And I mean, obviously I can't necessarily tell, right? Unless they are all in the same guild or something. Yeah. I don't necessarily know whether people are grouped up together or not. But I figure if I can't tell, then, it's still fine. Like, I don't care if they're grouped. If we're having a good match anyway, then it doesn't matter. And just having a bad match where one side dominates also doesn't automatically mean it's a pre-mate. That has absolutely been a thing before 8-man queues. Sometimes matchmaking is just like that. Mm-hmm. So I tend to not assume that, just because we got stomped in Hardball, the enemy must have been a pre-mate. I think for some people it's become this sort of bogeyman that they blame for everything. I remember a Quash Hardball, which was actually a really good match, and it ended like 2-1 or something. But the entire time, someone kept going on in chat, "Oh my God, they are a pre-mate. We don't stand a chance." And I was like, "What are you talking about, dude? It's a really even match."
Yeah.
But somehow people get it in their heads that pre-mates are ruining everything. I just don't see it. I'm not saying people are lying. But it's like, I'm just not seeing it. And I solo queue 99% of the time. So
interesting. Yeah, but for me, it's the opposite perspective. So I pre-made queue 99% of the time. And most of the games will play against another pre-made, right? Because there's matchmaking in the game, which is at least somehow working. So if there's a 4-man pre-made in queue and, you're queuing against them as another 4-man pre-made, most of the time they will be on the enemy team, right? If you're both in queue at the same time, the game will figure that out. And there's sometimes some weird things happening where maybe there's like, let's say 3 pre-mates in queue. And of course, the different group sizes make it harder for the game to build a proper match sometimes, where you have, maybe a 4-man and then the other team, there's maybe 2 3-mans, which means now you have, a group of 6 against a group of 4, but they're not all coordinated, right? Like I think the key problem, maybe ignoring like the occasional 8-man queue, which anyway usually doesn't last very long because other players will stop queuing because it's kind of stupid. And the 8-man pre-mate sits in queue for 20 minutes sometimes until the game eventually pops. But yeah, if you're kind of ignoring that, I think the biggest issues is not pre-mate versus solos. It's not enough players in the queue so that you cannot have proper matchmaking, right? Because the thing about pre-mates is that usually I mean, you make pre-mates with your friends or with other players that you somehow know because maybe you played against them in PvP and you know that they know what they're doing, they're good players. So if you're queuing alone and there's another pre-mate, it's maybe like, you don't want to play against them solo. None of your friends are online. Maybe you invite another player that you know who's good, right? And then you're gonna have what happens frequently is you have a bunch of pre-made players, which are all, have been playing this game for maybe 10 years. They all know their class very well. They have the perfect gear. And of course, if they go up against, Scooby-Doo and friends who maybe try out the game for the first time, and it's their first time PvPing, that match is not gonna go very well, right? It's gonna be very lopsided. So, but in a perfect world, if you had enough players in the queue, you could do something like, having, I think they do have that actually, some kind of hidden matchmaking rating, whereby they say, depending on how well you perform in PvP, I don't know, your win rate, your average damage done, you're going to have some kind of hidden matchmaking rating, and the game will basically, the higher you climb, put you against better opponents, right? And, if all the 4 best players on the server right now are in your pre-mate, you're going to get teammates who are maybe really new at the game. So you're going to have to try to carry them against, the other 8 players on the enemy team. And the other 8 players are maybe some of the better solo players, for example, right? Like that could work because there is still players queuing solo or smaller premates, 2-man premates and so on, people playing with a friend who are very good at the game, and you could build balanced matches with them. But you need some players to fill up the matches. And ideally also have matches where you do have 8 solos going against 8 solos, right? Or matches where you have less experienced players going against some players with, the similar experience level. So they have some chance to learn, because you cannot learn very much if you go into a match and you get one shot by 4 PowerTechs, for example, right? The only thing you learn there is maybe, okay, they can do that. So next time if I see a PowerTech, I try to run the other way or something, right? You're not learning very much. But the question then, I guess, is like, why don't new players, or maybe players who are more on the casual side of things, who maybe play a bit of story and a bit of operations, like what is keeping them from trying out PvP, from queuing up, right? Because I think, like you said, the seasons in itself, maybe not for me, but I can see the idea. It makes sense to me that you want to have some rewards to get more players interested in the game mode. I think it's a very good thing. But maybe from your perspective, like what do you think are some of the biggest issues in the game? We talked about the gearing a bit. We talked about the pre-made issue, or let's say the matchmaking issue, I guess. But like from a new player's perspective, like is that it, or is there something else that you see that is keeping them from queuing up?
I don't really know. I guess a part of it, at least, is that the focus on the story is just much bigger now than it used to be in the early days. Something you'll often hear people say when they talk about the game at launch, they say like, oh, you had to do all the side quests or you wouldn't get enough XP. And that was always a lie, because I was like, I skipped whole planets. What are they talking about? But the point was, you had to do something other than the story. So for me, that was often doing a bit of PvP, doing a flashpoint, just basically doing different things so you would level up. But now, obviously, leveling is, you can level pretty much just doing the story, and you can ignore everything else. And it goes pretty fast as well. So you kind of don't have much of an incentive to even look at these other options. And I think that does somewhat contribute. And then, like, even if you're interested, you might queue up and never get a pop if you're on one of the smaller servers. So you're like, I guess this isn't happening. So people sort of don't encounter it normally in the early game. And I'm not sure what would be the best way to introduce them to it, because, like I said, I think there are already a lot of rewards just for doing PvP. So I'm not sure just slapping more rewards onto it is the way to go. But I guess some sort of incentive to maybe at least try PvP more at low levels. I'm not sure, maybe better gear rewards even at the moment. The rewards you get out of the boxes in lobby are funny. They are often for the wrong spec, or they're for level 70 when you're level 20. I have no idea why they give what they give. They're not very useful a lot of the time. So yeah, anything to just make it more attractive to at least try it out, I guess. Would be good.
Maybe they need to do a quest where you need to rescue your wife, your companion, through PvP or something like that. Maybe that's gonna get them into the Warzones, right? Ilara Dorn has been captured by an evil primate, and you need to win a Warzone. You need to win a Warzone.
It's funny, but there is this one after one companion quest where you have to PvP for M1 4X or Pierce on Imp side. And I've had so many people hate on that. I'm always very confused because it only requires Valor 40, I think, which is really easy to get. And usually when I get to that point in the story, I just can recruit them automatically. Like I don't even need to do anything because I'm already Valor 40. But to some people, just having this one side quest, even this requires you to PvP, is extremely unattractive and upsetting. I don't know. I think it's just basically the player base has become more focused on the story because a lot of people who like the other things have sort of fallen off because they wanted to get more support for the preferred play mode. And since they don't get it, that population gets smaller, and then it also becomes harder to pull new people into it because there is not as much focus on it.
Yeah, I mean, PvP used to be, I guess other games have like some different PvP modes, right? Like more of the open world PvP things going on. I know that I think Guild Wars has some kind of is it even like server versus server PvP? I'm not quite sure. I think I read something about that at one point. But that was a thing I was thinking about, right? Like maybe you have some, I don't know, kind of like a dark versus light event or something, right? Like it used to be back in the day where you could pick a side to fight for, and then whatever side would be winning at the end would get some rewards or something like this, right? I mean, it was more of a PVE thing back then, right? With the original dark versus light thing. But maybe something like this, right? Or maybe they do, I don't know, some kind of server events. I mean, unfortunately, some servers are very small right now. As you said, they should probably merge some of them. I mean, they in general like the idea that they want to have the Shea Whistler one, for the APEC guys that are playing. I guess that mostly have reroll to Starforge. But I don't know, maybe you have some kind of, I don't know. I'm not really sure what's the proper solution, but basically give people like a reason to care about PvP somehow, beyond just the rewards, because obviously the rewards either they're not properly working or they don't want to put any rewards that people actually want in there. I think the one thing that is working maybe is that you can get the PvP seasons token, and then with those you can buy some of the old ranked rewards, which otherwise, used to be gated behind some kind of rating, right? Like you needed to get, I don't know, gold rating in arenas to get some kind of holo rancor mount as a reward at the end of the season. So like a lot of players are doing the PvP seasons now to get like these old mounts that maybe they missed back then because they weren't playing in my case, or maybe because, whatever, they didn't get the rating that they wanted. And now you can kind of buy the replicas, so it's again the completionist or collector's approach, which I think works because, a lot of players are basically playing the game for the fashion and the collections aspect. So you could play into that, or, I mean, of course, there's the competitive nature. Maybe it's some kind of open world event, right? I wish there would be more events in the game, actually. Like similar to the, they have these seasonal events where something is happening. Some players, of course, are organizing some, player events, like community-driven. But in terms of PvP, there's not really much going on, which I think is kind of a shame. I wish that would be more of a priority somehow, because there is still a community that plays the game pretty much only for PvP, or at least predominantly PvP. And I think it has, still the potential for a lot of players to come back. And one thing that's cool about, I think, PvP is that, if you are playing in, a PvP-focused guild or something, or you are, a member of a group of people that usually play together in a pre-mate, is the social aspect of it, right? Like as opposed to the very big, focus on kind of solo player modes that they have in the stories and so on, where basically you are able to complete the whole game as a solo player without ever needing to group up with anyone. The exceptions being, of course, operations, right? But there you have the group finder. You can basically just push the button, and then you still kind of don't need to talk to anyone if you don't really want to. You need to play with them, but in PvP that's not really the case, right? In PvP, if you really want to, compete against the best players, then you kind of need to group up at some point. You need to find other players to play with, simply because you need to learn from them, for example. So I actually think if they maybe did some kind of focus more on, bringing back the PvP guilds of old, which was really fun, where you have many players, dueling all day long and trying to learn from each other. That was a fun time back then in the game, at least for me.
I feel like that has definitely changed, because I was actually one of the questions on my list was, do you feel like PvP guilds are no longer a thing? Because I remember back in the day there were a bunch of PvP guilds and I would always recognize the names. But now when I think about it, I don't really get that anymore. I mean, occasionally I'll see an old guild name, but I don't see a lot of people from the same guild that make me think, oh yeah, this is a PvP guild. Is this just no longer a thing? Or
yeah, there's pretty much only a couple of them left. Like I can maybe think of a handful of names on Darth Malgus. And this whole guild identity thing is also not that strong anymore as it used to be, right? Like back then, that used to be a big thing, right? You would pretty much, many players would at least in the beginning, focus really a lot on basically queuing with the people in their guild, right? And in the beginning, you had even the ranked Warzones, right? Where you had the 8 versus 8 game modes. So a lot of the guilds would make their own team, but the kind of deciding factor was the guild. So you would organize in the guild, right? You would mostly play with other players from your guild. And that was kind of the community that the whole thing was revolving around, right? If you would see another PvP guild in the game, you would try to, maybe you would think, you're better than those guys and try to prove it in the match, right? There was some kind of rivalry and competition between the guilds. And of course, nowadays you still have that, but it's on a way smaller level. So,
I feel like the whole social aspect has definitely changed for me, at least, because I remember doing PvP with my guildies in the past. And I'm saying that as someone who's been in the same guild since 2012 on Darth Malgus. I'm still in the same guild. And I even found this guild because of PvP, even though it's not a PvP guild. But basically, I was in a different guild at launch, and then it fell apart, as many guilds did at the time. And I found a new guild because I recognized some names in PvP, and they seemed like nice guys. So we whispered each other a bit, and it was like, oh, and you were also doing ops, and yeah, we're looking for more people. Sure, you can join us. And then I wasn't specifically there for PvP, but I met them through PvP. And I remember grouping with a lot of also other random people that would just seem nice, and we would group up and play together. But I actually solo queue a lot of the time now, precisely because of this pre-made stuff, which is kind of weird, I guess. But basically, I feel like if I invite even one friend, I'm kind of punished with the longer queue times.
Yeah.
And as a casual player, if I invite a friend who may or may not even be that good at PvP, I feel I'm kind of kneecapping myself, because now I'm increasing my chances of being put against the proper PvP pre-made instead of against random casuals. So I've started turning people down. I'm like, nah, I'll just solo queue, which feels really rude. but I feel like we're not really helping ourselves by queuing up just to be friendly, because it might actually make the experience worse if we don't have like a bigger, more experienced group. Just to like two random friends, it might not be such a good idea in the current scenario.
That's true. It's for sure is the case. Like if you queue premade, you're more likely to go up against another premade, and if then one of them of the premates is not pulling their weight, then for sure sometimes you might be better off queuing solo. But yeah, as you said, I think that's kind of a shame, actually, because back in the day when it was more like revolving around the guilds, you would mostly be in TeamSpeak and socialize with the other guys, and you would mostly queue with them, right? And there were so many varied skill level in those guilds, right, that you you would have maybe one more experienced group. You would have one group for the noobs. And then, eventually, like I was in the noob group, try to improve and try to get to the more experienced group, for example, right? Or back then it was even with right, you had the guys that were playing ranked. They got a spot on the team, and the other guys were trying to get in there. Maybe if one of them couldn't play, right, you try to perform really well and get better at your class and do well in the regular Warzones, maybe with the guild leader. So he would give you a spot on the ranked Warzone team at some point or something like this, right? And I mean, nowadays, unfortunately, with the only PvP guilds that are there, if you're a new player that wants to get into the game, it's not that easy even to get in there, right? Because like, first of all, you probably have like no idea who to ask. And yeah, maybe in the Warzone, you see 4 people from the same guild. Okay, that's probably a PvP guild, which might or might not be the case, because there's also a lot of casual guilds, or let's say, more like community and conquest focused guilds who are also PvPing sometimes, because it does give you, as you said, tech fragments and the conquest objectives and so on. But yeah, if you want to get into PvP, it's not even that easy these days, because those guilds that still exist that mostly play PvP, they tend to be quite elitist, most of them, right?
I would think so. I mean, I don't know them.
Yeah, I mean,
it makes sense.
Let's say if you're like really a new player and you've never played this game and you're writing the guild master of one of those guilds, you're probably not gonna get an invite if you're like a real noob, right? Like most of those guilds, they're not meant for building a community or developing new players. They're more focused on, okay, we are some of the best PvPers and we're gonna compete against some of the other best PvPers in the game, and we're all in the same guild because we like each other and we don't like those guys or something like this, right? There's always someone always has drama, and then people leave their guilds and go join another guild or be guildless for a while, but eventually end up with one of the 3 or 4 groups that are out there and running around. So, and the really concept of like a community focused PvP guild, I mean, if there's one, let me know. Because I would like to be involved. That was actually one of the things I was thinking about, because of the whole aspect of getting new players into the game. Like if that doesn't happen, then very soon there's not going to be games. There's not going to be queues popping even at prime time anymore, right? Like if there's no new players coming in, as you said, old players, they're going to take a break or they're going to stop queuing, or someone's drama with someone else is going to boil over, and then players are going to be mad and they're going to stop queuing. And that would be a sad time, like if the queues get even longer than they are now, right? So I actually think that's probably one of the most important things, like to have some form of or some avenue where new players can learn about the game. And if they decide to try out PvP for the rewards or for the fun of it or whatever, then they have a way to learn, right? Which is one of the reasons why I started the YouTube channel, which is, I mean, there's a lot of gameplay and stuff I upload, but actually the actual reason that I started it was because, a lot of the other PvP-focused content creators quit after they removed ranked from the game. And I thought it would be a shame if there was no one to, maybe do class guides or like some tutorials how to get into PvP for like newer players. So that was the actual reason why I thought about starting like a PvP channel.
That's good work. It's definitely something that's needed, and I imagine it must be pretty scary to get into PvP from scratch nowadays, because again, it was a bit easier back in the day because we were all new, but now there's so much knowledge involved and everything just feels a bit more hardcore. Like back in the day, we would queue with guildies like who had no idea about PvP, but they would just try it out, and we would sometimes play against each other, and it was still fun. It was relatively low stakes. I feel like with the focus being more on the rewards, it feels, I don't know, more focused on getting it done. It's like I don't want to. It sounds really cruel, but I'm looking at the reward and I'm like, okay, I'd like to fill up this bar, and for this bar I need to, I don't know, win 4 matches. So do I really want to lower my chances by grouping with someone who may not be as good, or making my queues longer because now I count as a mini pre-made, or I don't know. It kind of makes it less attractive to just play for fun, because it's weird. But yeah, too much focus on rewards kind of clashes with focusing on just fun, because you're worried about losing feels more punishing and waiting feels more punishing because it's wasted time in which you're not achieving anything.
I really believe that like if you're not enjoying the core gameplay, like whatever is fun for you about, whether it's the class that you play, how it interacts with the other classes, whether it's, outplaying other players and the mind games thing about PvP, right? Or like winning that really close fight because you saved your teammates at like 1% HP, right? Like whatever it is. But for me, like the core gameplay needs to be fun, because at least for me, maybe that's just my perspective, but I think no reward really in this game, at least, could make me try. I don't know. What is there in the game? There's something called uprisings, right? I have played a couple of them. Yeah. But let's say they would put, I don't know, billions of credits on that. Yeah, I would maybe run it until I have enough credits, but just because I don't enjoy the core gameplay of that enough to really care about it, I'm never going to try that game mode. And I think for PvP, you can for sure get some people interested in it, like via the rewards. If you say, right, there's this really cool mount we designed, and for some reason it's not on the cartel market, it's now exclusively available through PvP, right? Or this whatever fancy new weapon. The old weapons used to be really cool. A lot of PvPers wanted those. Or maybe it's the augments. They bring back the augments, the mats for crafting them, which were at some point like available only through like master mode operations and then the ranked arenas. Like you can get people interested in PvP with the rewards, but I think they stay there for the fun of simply PvPing. That's my opinion, right? But
yeah, I think they work well as an incentive, but I actually think that basically having too many rewards can sort of reduce the fun. I think I wrote about this on the blog once, because I looked it up, because there's this thing in psychology called over-justification effect, which is basically if you like doing something and then you're given a reward for it, you kind of stop doing it just for fun, because your brain kind of trains itself to just do it for the reward. And I worry a bit that that's happening with PvP, with all the seasons and so on. That because I used to PvP very randomly whenever I felt like it, but now I'm like, okay, I'm gonna PvP during the season, and then need to take a break so I have time again to PvP a lot during the season for the reward, which I don't even care about that much, but it's about filling that bar and doing the thing when the game tells me to do the thing, instead of just when I feel like it. And some of the most fun matches I have are still the ones where I am doing it kind of randomly, where I'm like, I mean, there's usually still some incentive that gets me into it. Like, say, I have a conquest objective that requires me to just do one more social activity. And I'm like, okay, I'll queue for Warzone, that will complete it, regardless of how the match goes. And then I have fun. And I mean, I obviously always, I love objectives, I always try to win. But I do like not having the pressure of, I need to win to get the reward, or I need to win to progress this bar or whatever. Just like, I'm playing this now, and I'll try to win, but I just want to have fun.
Yeah. Again, for me, this like the casual aspect of simply, queuing up just to play a game is really the one that keeps me still going after all these years. Simply because I enjoy playing my class in PvP, right, and trying to get better at that, and that's the part that's fun for me. But I do realize that not everyone thinks like me, luckily. So I was thinking, like, how could you get new players more interested in PvP? I think to be honest, like the time of the really big PvP focused guilds is probably over. At some point, I tried to start one, but like it needs a lot of time to manage a guild. Actually, that's something for sure I underestimated. If you want to properly manage a guild, keeping people engaged, organizing events, things that you do commonly as a guild.
Tell me about it. I am an officer in my guild, and my husband is a GM. So it's been the same guild for over a decade. So yeah. I know about all the effort involved.
It takes a lot of time for sure. And then you need to make sure, especially in PvP, it's probably one of the modes where you need to communicate the most with each other, right? So there's a lot of PvP requires that you support each other. Otherwise, you might as well queue solo, right? If you're, you're going to queue as a pre-mid of 4, and then one runs to west, one runs to east, and 2 run to middle, and they're not really supporting each other at all, then, they might as well each of them queue by themselves, unless you're doing it for a specific reason, right? To defend the node or something like this. But you need a lot of communication. And then if people are not compatible because of language or culture or just personality, right, then you already have a problem. So it's almost like, yeah, I mean, it's, I guess, like building a sports team or a team in any other organization. There's a lot of challenges, but I mean, it's also a video game, right? So something that people should be doing for fun. And at least me, like with the YouTube channel, I also still like to play the game, and sometimes I prioritize actually finishing editing a video or something over playing the game myself. But I don't have time to also run a whole guild on the side, because if you want to do it properly, it does take a lot of time, and you really need to focus on that. So my current approach is like I'm applying to join one of the bigger guilds, and trying to get some more people interested in PvP in one of the bigger guilds. So yeah, if there's any of them out there that want to hire an experienced PvPer as a kind of coach, then let me know.
Oh, so not a bigger guild that already does PvP, but you mean a guild that is big now and probably doesn't do much PvP?
Yeah, basically, exactly. Because I think if you're a new player and you're just starting the game, you know, very likely at some point you're gonna get invited, or you're gonna join, you know, one of the bigger guilds on the server, simply because maybe, you know, you want to join a guild for, I don't know, the bonuses they get you, the XP bonus and some of the crafting, right? But I mean,
PvP and being gilded does actually go well together, because as I mentioned, the conquest objectives for PvP are very good, and you get all those the things that your first guest was farming for, the blue versions. You get them from conquest. You don't have to kill mobs, actually. You get them from conquest as well if you're in a guild.
True.
So
yeah,
it's
true.
pretty good for cash.
That's true. Yeah. For the guild flagship, the unlocks for the rooms. Yeah. What are they called? Encryptions and frameworks, I think.
Yes, that's the word. Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I thought, you know, instead of starting a PvP guild or inviting some people into the guild that we already have, which anyway is mostly, you know, we had this guild for or at least the same group of friends playing together for 10 years now. It's not that easy for someone else to come in there and just kind of slot in, because first of all, it's all Germans. And it's all Germans that only play PvP in Star Wars all day. It's a difficult group to join and kind of fit in, right?
Is that on Darth Malgus or on Tulak Horde?
Darth Malgus, yeah. We used to play on the German server, which then became Tulak Horde. But yeah, at some point transferred over most of the characters to the English server, because the competition was better there, basically.
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing I'm seeing more people talk about, moving from Tulak Horde or from Satil Shan to the bigger servers. Even though those are still okay, I guess, now, but they are slower than the big servers. And yeah, it's funny to me, because I'm always against dead server narratives, because I think there is a place for smaller servers. Not everything has to be a mega server and so on. And in the past, before they did the various server merges, I was always like, no, why do people complain about the population? It's fine. And I couldn't understand why people wanted mergers. So it's funny to me that I'm like at this point where I'm like, I don't necessarily want mergers, but I'm definitely noticing population problems. So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, mergers would be one solution, right? I mean, there was this cross-server discussion many, many years ago, which eventually they never introduced. And then we're going to have something better than cross-server. I'm not sure if that ever happened. But
I don't think so.
I mean, I think there's a place for server and server identity, right? It's kind of nice if you run into the same players over and over again. And it kind of builds, a feeling of community as well, which I like in games. But at the same time, it's not very fun if, you know, maybe you have a day off and you want to queue some PvP during the day, and then on the German server, it's simply not popping until, you know, 6 p.m. whenever people come off work. Because also, let's not forget, not only did the game age by how many, 13 years or something, so did most of the players. So I think like the average age of the players, if I look at my YouTube videos, for example, like you can see the average age of your viewers, right? It's now more in the 25, 35 area compared to other games where you have mostly, you know, like teenagers playing it. So I think, a lot of the players growing up with the game, and I'm not sure how many like new players are coming in. like the kids these days want to still play MMOs with the old guys like me. But
Yeah, that's definitely a thing.
I don't know. I mean, server merges, they will happen at some point, I guess, when or they will not happen. But yeah, to get the casual players into PvP, at least that was the best idea I had so far, right? Maybe join one of the really big guilds on the server and try to simply recruit some people, right? Try to maybe queue some games with them, or I don't know, show them some things, do some kind of events maybe as well, was something I was thinking about, which they used to be, way more back in the day. You had, PvP tournaments which were organized by players, and then you had the open PvP things, right? So some of that happening organically, simply because, someone was leveling somewhere, someone else was ganking them. They had some PvP going on then, right? You call your friend, he logs in and tries to kill that higher level guy, which was happening back then. And nowadays, not so much, because you can simply switch to a PvE instance. Or, I mean, back then you had those, someone would, I don't know, figured out a way to get to the Imperial fleet as a rep and the other way around, or you would raid a base. So the whole open world PvP, general PvP events, whether it was organizing a dueling tournament, which was happening a lot on all the different servers. I think that was cool, right? If there was some kind of, I mean, in a perfect world, it would be even, with some rewards maybe supported by the developers or something, right? Why can you not have a monthly, or let's have it a season, once at the PvP season, you have some kind of tournament? Because there is modes like that in the game that you can use, right? Would be super fun if there would be, I think, some kind of interaction, something to do for endgame PvPers other than just, queuing Warzones over and over again without any real objective to work towards, right? Because you can tell people, hey, let's play PvP, and they might ask you okay, but why? What's the goal?
No, I was just thinking, because you mentioned, in the open world. So I always played on a PvE server, but I think they have sort of split things up a lot more than they used to be. Because even on the PvE server in the past, right, you would ride into an enemy base and you would get flagged, and combat could ensue unexpectedly. You would have to flag yourself, but there were situations where it just happened. Or during the Rakul event, right, in the Rakul tunnels, I would just come out of the base, and for some reason there would be people fighting, and I would just heal them and join in, and form a big pile.
That was fun.
Or obviously the commanders nowadays, they only spawn in the PvP instance, and in the past they would spawn on PvE servers, and but you would I think at some point get flagged if you engage in combat with them or something. So if there was a bit more crossover where people would kind of encounter PvP, even if they were mainly there for the PvE, but they've really split it out now. So it's if you're in the PvE instance, you never ever have to worry about PvP. Even if you go into the enemy base and kill every single guard, nobody can touch you. That's a bit weird, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess that was one of the things I talked on the first podcast with Beo about, the random PvP ensuing as you're trying to do something else, right? I mean, that can be fun. It can also be very annoying if you're on the receiving end of something, right? You're trying to do a world boss, and you're flagged for PvP, another group comes and starts killing you before you have a chance to attack the boss. But for me, always those are exactly the things that give you reason to group up and maybe to join a guild that's more focused on PvP, or not even a PvP guild, just a guild in general. I think focus on guilds in games like this is a good thing. I'm not the biggest fan of having it go more the single player route, because I think, there's good single player games. But for me personally, I don't play this game. I would not play this game as a single player, right? Even for PvP is fun. But even in other games that are more focused on single player, I typically, at least at this point in my life, like to play games as a social activity with my friends. I guess other people see it differently, right? But for me, it made the game a lot more fun to kind of find a guild and then later find a group of friends even in the game. And for me, that's also something I enjoy now. Obviously, with the YouTube channel and all, I get quite lucky because it seems that a lot of people are enjoying the videos. And I do get a lot of whispers in the game of people that are just reaching out to me and saying, hey, you're the guy with the videos, right? You're the guy from YouTube.
Oh, that's nice.
I always enjoy that. And I think that's nice because like meeting people through video games and otherwise, which can be like a quite lonely endeavor, for me, it's a lot of fun, right? Like there's a lot of people, for example, like you, I would never probably even have met if not for this game, right? So, I think it's good. More of that, more of grouping, more of guilds.
Yeah, the social aspect is very important to me as well. I mean, having been in the same guild for so long, I am less open to random conversations, I guess, because I am spending time with my friends as it is. So there is that. But plus, obviously, the more you allow random queuing, the less need there is for friends. I mean, if you remember the time before there was a group finder, I'm not saying I want to go back to not having a group finder, but when you can't just press a button to do a flashpoint, when you have to talk to people, it does obviously encourage social interaction. I think the game isn't all bad now. I think Conquest, for example, in guilds is a really genius system because it encourages you to join a guild even if you're completely solo, because you will get the extra rewards. And then once you're in the guild, maybe you will start talking to people. So I think that's something that works quite well. I'm just not sure how open people are to getting into group content if they've spent all their time just leveling through the story by themselves and there's never anything else to encourage them to group. There was just a lot more of that back in the day. I loved doing heroics while leveling. Like you said, they were much harder, so it made sense to group up with random people. But nowadays, why would you can solo everything? So why?
Yeah. I mean, it might be fun if, for the more competitive players, if they would have something to work towards, right? Like you said, basically the conquest thing as an idea for, how you bring together guilds and they work together over a longer period of time on some kind of joint objective, which is basically conquering a planet and then having, at the end of the day, it's to have the name of your guild on top of the leaderboard, right? I guess for most of them at least. So
yes, that is one area I'm always very excited about. So my guild is actually fairly small, like a small to medium, depending on where you draw the line. And we're not able to compete in Conquest because the people on the leaderboards they are huge and very active. But every now and then, when the Total Galactic War event is on, and there's all these planets available, you can sometimes snag a first place in one that's less contested. Mm-hmm. And we've had some amazing different kinds of PvP there, where we would do our activities to earn conquest points, and the other guild would do the same, and would be neck on neck. And it's a funny kind of PvP where you are not actually PvPing, but still competing against each other. And from what I understand, it's also very full of drama. I haven't had too much exposure to it, fortunately, because we're not regular competitors. But I have had an occasion where we invaded the planet, and the guy in second place, with who I can only assume was the GM, would whisper me insults and stuff, and be like, "But we everyone agreed that we would get this planet." It's like, what are you even talking about? Who agreed? I have no idea what you're on about.
The Council of Guild Elders, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Council of Guild Elders that we are not invited to, but apparently still bound to. So yeah, there's all kinds of strange people when it comes to Conquest.
How many people are in your guild?
Well, it sort of varies. I think the active accounts are something between 50 and 100 still, maybe.
Okay.
But
not that small.
Yeah, but some of them are just, they are solo players and they just do their thing. They log on into whatever. I would say the really active core is more like 20, 30. Mm-hmm. And yeah, those are people that have mostly known each other for a long time, and we do stuff like ops together or flashpoints or world bosses for galactic seasons and all these kinds of things.
Yeah, and is it like a daily thing? Like you pretty much play the game every day, or how does it work in your guild?
I log in every day, but in terms of the guild, there are activities. So there's a bit of a focus on ops. So the different ops teams run on different days. Like my team runs Tuesdays and Fridays, and another team runs on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Mondays and Tuesdays. And then we have a social night on Saturdays where we just anyone can come, and we usually do something like the big group seasons objectives, like world bosses, or like right now this is the dark versus light bosses. Obviously we group up for those and kill those together, or we just do a random ops for fun. Which is, like I say, ops has some things in common with PvP in that there isn't that much support for it, and there isn't that much reward for it. it's just people just do it because it's a fun thing to do with their friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been almost 2 years now since R4 came out.
Yep, and that one was not their best work, to be honest.
Yeah, I still haven't killed the first boss. It's very frustrating. I think they nerfed it now, so maybe I should try again. But we tried it when it came out. I totally kicked our ass with it when it comes to the movement. Like, I think we got to the droids once, the ones that you have to kind of pull together and kill quickly. When you click all the colors at the same time. But yeah,
I assume you're talking about veteran mode. Did you have once do it on story mode?
Yeah, we did do it on story mode, but on veteran mode, unfortunately, we didn't make it past the first boss. Yeah,
no, we did that thing for a while where we got someone else's lockout to farm boss 2 and 3. And then eventually we managed to kill boss 1 once. And I haven't really been back since, because we were like, well, we're never going to get the 4th boss if the first boss is like this. And we've not been back for that one since then.
Yeah, the first one was kind of tricky. Like, a lot of players were struggling not standing in the fire on that one.
And I mean, Ops kind of has a similar problem to PvP, I feel, with that it's really hard to get new players into it because they're just not used to playing with other people. And I mean, story mode Ops are probably a better introduction for new players than anything that PvP has to get completely new players into it. The story mode Ops are so easy, like half the team can die and you can still kill it, or it's plus, most things don't kill you anyway. So it's extremely forgiving, but it does sort of get you used to the whole concept of just being in a group with other people and, doing bosses, and the bosses have mechanics, that sort of thing. But then it's still quite a step up to veteran mode, because suddenly those mechanics will kill you. And that's still quite a big step where people are like, whoa, what?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that exactly. I'm not sure if that's the best introduction, because in story mode, you can tank a lot of the mechanics, or you can heal through them somehow. But then on veteran or master mode, they suddenly one-shot you, right? So you need to completely figure out, okay, what does Nephra actually do? What are those stacks? I cannot simply stand there and we kill her in 20 seconds. Now I need to turn her around and something like this. And at some point, I actually tried to get into a little bit of operations as well. But as you said, I at least found it quite hard, even having played some of the operations. I think actually probably all of them at this point, maybe except for 1 or 2, on story mode. Because it is quite a big step up on veteran mode, and I'm not sure, maybe I haven't looked enough, but I didn't find very many up-to-date sites where you can read guides on operations, for example. There used to be Delphi, I remember from a while back, but I think that one doesn't work anymore. And so if you want to get into operations now, I was thinking the other day, maybe I would like to try some operations, because I never cleared this one on master mode, for example. But it's also not that easy to get into that, because of the lack of guides, I guess, or maybe even groups hiring, right? Most of the groups that do the harder content, they are also quite set, and they have regular players playing in them. So it's also not that easy to get into that, actually.
Yeah, I agree. Though also, to be honest, with veteran mode, I think it's mostly pretty well covered. But with master modes, it's kind of astounding to me just how little there is for some of them. Like Gods from the Machine came out in 2018 or something, and the master mode came a bit later. But there is almost no information about those bosses to this day. It's because so few people did them, and that's why I can't blame the devs for not wanting to support master mode operations anymore. I just wish they'd make at least more of the easier ones, even if they don't have a master mode. But again, it's still probably only a small minority of players doing them, so it's not a priority.
Strange. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still thinking about getting into some PVE maybe at some point, simply for also kind of.
You should be fine as a good PvPer. I found that a good PvPer can always do operations okay, because you'll know rotations and you know how to react to things. The biggest challenge is probably when a mechanic requires you to stand still. This is the one thing I found.
That's we cannot do, yeah.
PvP is very difficult.
Always jumping or randomly moving left and right to confuse the enemies, yeah.
Yep.
Confusing yourself in the process.
But in terms of mechanics, there shouldn't be anything that you can't figure out.
You think so, yeah? Okay. Well, now I feel a bit better. Maybe so you would you recommend, if you're a PvPer trying to get into a raid, you just, assuming that you already know how to play your class and you have the proper gear, you simply try out the operations and do trial and error then, yeah?
I think it might definitely be worth trying if you're a PvPer and you're looking for something to mix things up a bit while waiting for some sort of new PvP content.
Yeah,
because it's definitely doable. And I mean, maybe it's a bit boring initially to wipe because I mean, PvE is obviously very static, right? The boss is the same boss no matter what you do, and you just have to learn the dance. And I guess that can be a bit uninteresting if you're a PvPer, but there are a lot of them that have interesting mechanics in terms of having to use your cooldowns and so on. And I think that would resonate with PvPers. Responding to those situations correctly.
Yeah, maybe I'll try it out. So what do you think about, like, are we ever going to get 8.0 at this rate, or is 7.6 coming out? I think they said at some point in December, right? Is that
That's a very good question. I was thinking about making a blog post about it, and I still might. It's a really tricky one because I remember that the devs were actually somewhat resistant to more expansions even some years ago. I seem to remember after Knights of the Eternal Throne, I think they even said at some point, "Oh, I don't know if we'll make more expansions or if we'll just keep making patches." I can't find the quote, but something like that was said somewhere. And then they did obviously go and make Onslaught eventually. And Onslaught did quite well from what I can tell. But then Legacy of the Sith was supposed to be this big celebration of, 10 years of SWTOR. And it had such a horrible launch. I was just looking at Twitch statistics today, and it's like you can see this sort of massive drop when Legacy of the Sith came out. Like there was a spike of people being like, "Oh yeah, what is this?" And then it was really bad, and obviously not everyone, but a lot of people were just annoyed and quit. And I think it's quite a feat to make an expansion that annoys your players more than it attracts returning players. So I'm like, well, if they want to make a new expansion, it has to be good. Like they can't make another half-assed one for whatever reason. It came out like that. Like obviously, I don't know what happened there. Maybe devs were pulled away to work on other projects when it was still BioWare, and that screwed it up. So I'm not blaming any specific dev, but obviously it didn't work out as it was supposed to. And if they want to make an 8.0, it needs to be good. It needs to knock it out of the park. I think it would need to deliver at least like 2 planets, an operation, a flashpoint, a Warzone, something like it would need to have something of everything, or else they can't really call it an expansion. And I know there's been endless talk about that. Like people have complained about SWTOR using the word expansion since the beginning. I remember Rise of the Hard Cartel came out, and people were like, "This is the expansion. It's just one planet." And like, there's obviously a debate around that. But even if we accept that, what SWTOR calls an expansion is not the same as what WoW calls an expansion, we also don't have to pay for it in SWTOR, so you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
We have to accept that it's smaller, but I still think there needs to be a certain minimum, because they've actually been pretty good with the recent patches, aside from the fact that obviously they haven't been supporting group content very well. But in terms of making new zones and continuing the story, they've been doing pretty well for the past couple years. So to be able to call something an expansion, it would have to be bigger than those normal patches, right? And I'm not sure they have the resources to really pull that off in the near future. So I can imagine them going for a while with more 7.x patches. But then they do seem to have a bit more freedom now with the planning, or at least they don't have the surprises that were at BioWare, where, devs would suddenly be needed to work on some other game.
Yeah.
So maybe they're able to plan better. I mean, I find it interesting, for example, that, we've had a new zone in every patch since 7.2. Even if it wasn't huge, there was a new planetary zone. Except I think the next one they said instead is going to take us back to all planets. So I was like, well, maybe if they planned the patch cycle in a certain way, they'll probably build a new expansion. Like if they plan to have, say, some patches where we don't get a new zone, but we do something else. And then they could put those devs that make new planets or whatever on to work on the expansion in the background. And maybe they could put something together. But I don't know if they want to risk that after how badly Legacy of the Sith bombed, because that seemed, basically they really just need to get it right if they want to do that. It can be a great sort of publicity thing to say, oh, we have an expansion and here's all this new stuff. But it really has to be good, because they can't have a repeat of that.
Hmm. I think I looked at the blog post you, I think, published today, right? What I thought was interesting was, there was like a big bump in kind of the onslaught / like early legacy of the Civ era. And then it dropped. It dropped, but it actually dropped to similar levels how it was in 2017, which I found interesting because I didn't play a lot back then. But I would have thought that the game was more active in 2017 compared to 2024. But at least based on those Twitch numbers, it seems to be, just as alive or just as dead, however you want to see it.
That doesn't really surprise me because that 2017 was sort of late-ish Knights of the Eternal Throne, and that was also a really bad time for the game with Galactic Command and basically them just ending that story, the whole Knight story, kind of awkwardly, and then being like, okay, we are now switching back to making planets, but we can't remember how to do it, so they're going to be really awkward for a while. So it was not a great time to be a player. There were a lot of things that were not great, and I mean, obviously we don't have subscription numbers, but I always tend to view that as a bit of a dark time for the game where a lot of people were not happy, including me for a while. So I actually think that the game is in a better place in many ways than it was then still. They just need to remember the group content players and give them a bit more love, even if they don't buy as many armor sets. I don't know, but all the content creators do group content. It's the kind of thing that keeps people playing longer and makes them promote the game. So, come play Flashpoints with me, or it's
or
the
PvP.
kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So they need to. I feel they need to invest some resource into it, even if it's not the most important thing. They have to keep it rolling along somehow.
Yeah, I mean, in the early expansions, at least, you could call them expansions because they expanded the game in the sense that you got new abilities, for example, right? Like you got the reflect on the commando and so on. Face walk on assassin, and then bubble on sorcerer, and so on. And in the last expansion, I thought it was very unfortunate that they actually took away most of the or many of the core abilities from a lot of the classes.
Yeah,
right?
that was. I mean, I don't mind them not trying to add too many things to avoid ability bloat, but I agree that sort of having a pruning at the same time as the expansion was a bit awkward. Yeah. Though I don't know. I don't know if it's as bad as some players make it out to be. I mean, I find as a more casual player, I don't mind so much that some rotations have fewer buttons because it makes it a bit easier to learn them.
Yeah.
But on my main, there are definitely some ability choices where to this day I don't like having to choose between like reflect and out or something. It's like one is a defensive and one is for moving, and I get why you maybe don't want me to have both of those things in PvP, but in PvE I often do need both, and it's just awkward to not be able to. Or the cryo grenade, like that was fun, stunning people in the fire in hardball. I can no longer do that because I cannot justify picking that over one of the others, and I don't know. I feel they overdid it a little bit maybe there with some of those selections. But then at the same time, I don't mind at level 80 that if things become a little more simple, because like I said, I think there is a lot going on in level 80 PvP in terms of cooldowns and speed boosts and defensives and so on. And it does help a bit to when there is a little less of that. But yeah, I definitely also get why it frustrates people, especially if you have been playing a class for a long time.
I think in terms of things that they could realistically do, I mean, I don't think we'll see them coming up with completely new abilities. I mean, I would be happy to be proven wrong on that one, but I don't think they will design new classes or really like code new abilities. I think more realistically, they'll maybe, design, slightly shuffle around some of the talents on the trees, or maybe even bring back some old utilities that you could choose maybe, right? Or some old choices in the talent tree that you can pick. That's something they could probably do, right? And there were some quite fun ones in there, or some quite powerful options, which now are not a thing anymore, right? Both for PvE and PvP.
Or they could introduce a new combat style, like I said, and then you can be a trooper, I don't know, who whacks things with a vibro sword or whatever.
I think that would kill the immersion a little bit, unfortunately. And as much as I would like being a PowerTech that can stealth out or something, I mean, maybe you can somehow argue that maybe, and if you're an advanced prototype, maybe you have some prototype stealth generator similar to an operative, right? I mean, that's why operatives can stealth. They don't have the force. So maybe a PowerTech could have that too. I was worrying it would break too much of the immersion of like the canon and the people that really care about the lore and so on.
No. What I mean is not changing the current ones, but to come up with a new combat style. Like, I mean, my example was like someone who uses a tech melee weapon, for example, right? Because I mean, we see that in the game, like NPCs using tech plagues or an electro staff or something. So it's not unknown, right? But none of the player classes. I mean, like as a Jedi or Sith, you can officially equip those things, but it's kind of not the intended way, you could say, right? You're expected to have a lightsaber, I guess.
Yeah.
But you could make a class that is about, say, being in melee, but also using tech weapons for fancy moves. It's just one idea, right? So they could do something like that.
Yeah, like a Wookiee based class, because they're quite powerful, right? They can use like melee attacks, but they also use bowcasters and stuff. So
something like that, yeah.
Something like not sure how you want to call that, but yeah, that could be fun. I'd play as a Wookiee for sure. So
I definitely do want them to look forward though, and not necessarily backwards. This is where we can talk about your SWTOR Classic thing, which you talk about with everyone so far. So that's why I wanted to comment on it.
But that's looking backwards, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think they probably shouldn't be doing something like that, because I want them to put the resources into the current game and make new things for the current game. And I feel if you're doing something like a SWTOR Classic would be too much work that doesn't really get us anywhere. Plus, to be honest, I also know some other people who have said, "Oh, I would play a SWTOR Classic," but I think that's too small a minority. And I say that as someone who loved WoW Classic, and I played the hell out of it in 2019 and 2020 in specific. But that was a very different use case, because in World of Warcraft they literally deleted 2 continents with everything on them, and the idea of Classic was that this was 2 continents worth of stuff that was no longer in the game and that people wanted to have access to again. And SWTOR has never had anything like that. I mean, the biggest changes overall to the world happened in Knights of the Fallen Empire, when they did remove some quests, but it wasn't a whole lot, and like some areas, but they didn't dramatically change anything. So I don't think restoring those old things would make for an exciting new play experience. Plus, I think they actually have introduced a lot of quality of life that is really good, and I wouldn't necessarily want to go back to, for example, always having to go to the spaceport, through the hangar, to my ship. Every time I want to travel to another planet, I don't miss that.
Yeah, the quick travel with the map, for sure. It's much more convenient. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would miss some of the quality of life things for sure. I'm not sure. I mean, the thing that the whole resource point of view, I mean, I don't really think that the current team is going to do a SWTOR Classic. I don't think that's possible. I mean, they barely have the resources, it seems, at that point to keep putting out, even like fully voiced story updates. So, it seems to me like they're focusing a lot on the story, and then some of the technical improvements, the better cinematic lighting and so on, things that are doing in there, and changing some of the textures and the graphics of some of the older planets. So not sure which one's going to be next. Maybe there was some talk about Nar Shaddaa, right? Didn't you write about something like that?
I don't think I did, but I do remember, yes, there was talk about updating another planet.
Yeah, something with... Yeah, so I guess they're going to keep updating some of the older planets and working on some DirectX 12 things. Like at the same time, I don't think the current team will do a SWTOR Classic. I also don't think they should, personally. But I think the core game, how it was designed back then, and by the people that built it back then, actually was pretty fun. And maybe if they took a little bit longer to put some more endgame into it, and didn't make the decision of having like the whatever custom version of the hero engine that they used, could have been a much more successful game, right? So like maybe the like going back to a SWTOR Classic vanilla, how it was back then, is not the right approach. The right approach would be, hey, let's have a Star Wars MMO, which is really well done. And it's basically, what SWTOR was supposed to be, but everyone always says, oh, this game has so much potential. That never really was fulfilled. Just basically, now this time, let's do it right? So maybe it's more, at the one hand, for sure, I would like to play the classes again from the classes that I played back then. like the old PowerTech skill trees and so on. But you probably have a point. I'm not sure for how long I would enjoy that actually. Like I think there might be a point where you are, you're going back and I remember this. I've done this 10 years ago and it was fun back then, but it's not 10 years ago. It's 2024. Maybe we should move on to, another game or SWTOR 2.0 or something like this, right? And like the next version of the game.
I mean, original SWTOR was much more of a hybrid between, a WoW-like MMO and single-player RPG. And I thought that was amazing. I absolutely loved that about it. But a lot of people seem to not like it. So either they thought, all this single-player focus is weird in an MMO, or they thought, well, I just like the RPG. I don't know why they spend time on all this weird group stuff. Or at least those were a lot of the comments I heard back then. So I think that would just be a problem again. I mean, I thought it was a great time in the game, but clearly a lot of people did not like this hybrid approach. So that's why we have more of a single player focus now than we did have back then.
Do you think it can work in the game, like this kind of hybrid approach?
I mean, it did work for me, but it probably wouldn't work on the scale they were planning for SWTOR in terms of how much money they invested in it, and wanted to continue 8 different class stories with updates every month.
Exactly.
Because there isn't that much of a market for it. But I guess I could imagine it working on a smaller scale.
Yeah, that's I think one of the things, right? They came up with this giant project back then of fully voiced classes, which was like the first MMO that was doing that, the class stories for all of the different classes. And I mean, I guess in the end you have then even on the Republic different voice actors, so actually you have 16 classes and so on, right?
It was insanely ambitious. Like I'm looking back at it, I was like, I don't know how anyone ever greenlit this. They had like, I think 4 different people just composing the music, never mind doing everything else. It was insanely huge. And I don't know how many millions of players they thought they would have needed to finance that. I don't think that was ever going to happen. They just assumed like World of Warcraft is only the beginning and we're going to make this game and it's going to be 3 times as big. Yeah. It's like, yeah, okay.
There was probably someone pitching some ridiculous business case in some board meeting at EA back then to get that thing waved through, yeah.
Yeah, and I always think, to be honest, that we as SWTOR players are actually quite lucky because we still get to benefit today from that huge investment that wouldn't really be justified for an MMO of the size it is now. But I mean, those class stories are still there. PvP is still fun. All those things they built back then are still good stuff and still there. So we're kind of lucky in that we got all this stuff for a relatively low price, even if they wanted many more players.
Yeah, you could say it like that. You could take the, let's say, a little bit more black-pilled perspective, right? That we're now in the Dark Ages, whereas previously we had the Roman Empire of great achievements and aqueducts and thermal baths and all of that. And now we're somewhere in the Dark Ages. The barbarians have taken over, and we get maybe one semi-voiced content update every couple of months.
But I can't look at it like that because I honestly think the story content has been good. I'm not saying it hasn't been without issues, but like when I go back and play some of the original class stories, they are great for what they are, and I like that there's all the variety, but they are also so basic in some ways. Like all the cutscenes are shot, reverse shot, like one shot of your character, one shot of the guy talking, then back to your character, that sort of thing. And there's no moving cameras. The cutscenes are often quite boring. Well, I exaggerate, but they're very basic, if you get what I mean, compared to what they did in the later years. So now there's a lot more cool stuff happening in the cutscenes, and we do get frequent story updates, because that's something people forget sometimes. Like after SWTOR launched, we didn't actually get the main story update for like 2 years. They were adding operations and stuff, which I also liked, obviously, but they were not doing anything with the story for a long time, I guess, because they had this original plan with the class stories, but then it didn't work out, so they had to rejig everything in the back end. Mm-hmm. But I like that we get the regular story updates now all the time, and that's really nice. So I can't. For me, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily the Dark Ages in every respect. You can definitely say that if you say someone with a focus on PvP, there is not that much love for it. But if there are other things you really like about the game, it's not all bad.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I like the game just for how it feels to play still. And I wish they would do a bit more like of the planets thing actually. So maybe it's like a new world, or I don't know what exactly events that are happening on planets, right? Be it PvP or PvE. So that's one of the things, like when you said like the quality of life and the quick travel in the group finder. Sometimes I like needing to have to go to places as well to get to an, I don't know, like a PvP zone on Tatooine, for example. I think is a really cool area. You have to go through the desert, and then you find this, these what is it, like giant tusks sticking out of the sand in a canyon somewhere. That's a really cool designed area, I think, where there used to be PvP going on back in the day and player organized events. And now not so much anymore,
I guess we'll see. I think they said in the next patch there would be some new thing to do that takes us back to old planets. I think that's how I understood the teaser.
Mm-hmm.
So we can see what that is like.
Yeah, I think I would enjoy that. Like something with more of the planets. Like hopefully they introduce Kashyyyk at some point. Because I like that planet a lot I think it was in the first KOTOR, no?
Yes.
The one with all the Wookiees where you go through the jungle. And it was, of course, quite basic back then, but that was actually one of my favorite planets.
I think that's definitely one a lot of people would like to see. Though, yeah, I'm not sure how you will do that with the giant trees. Because if you're just at the bottom and see giant tree trunks, it's not that interesting. But if you actually made it, say, vertical so they can go up the trees and down, that could be challenging. Could be interesting as well, though.
I like giant trees. Maybe that's what the DirectX 12 and graphics updates are about. Readying the game for
better trees.
The giant tree update.
That would be amazing.
Wasn't there a giant tree decoration in one of the last developer live streams?
There is a giant tree decoration that drops in the interpreters.
There you go.
Yes, and that is really big. I have that in one of my strongholds.
I don't think I have that one. I need where do I get this one?
I don't remember. I think it's just one of the ones that drops randomly in that area if you like kill mobs.
Okay. Yeah, I gotta go back then because I like giant trees. The whole stronghold decoration thing is another thing which I think is interesting. Not sure, but if you are like a big stronghold decorator.
Not exactly. I'm mostly the kind who logs in and out in a stronghold and does all the bank stuff. But I have got a bit more into it recently with the last season actually, because they gave us this new stronghold, and actually also in the seasons before that they gave a lot of deco rewards. And at some point I was just like, I have like 12 of this nice looking chair. Maybe I should do something with that. So I have been doing a bit more decorating. Plus, in the Galactic season last time they also had an objective that was like visit a random Manan stronghold or whatever. So I would visit people's strongholds and actually look at them and be like, oh, this is a pretty neat layout they created here. So that actually increased my interest in that feature a bit. And I bet it makes them a decent amount of money because so much stuff on the Catel market is like stronghold bundles and they're pretty pricey. I bet even if you never see the housing enthusiasts, they probably keep the game alive to some extent, just buying more chairs.
Probably, yeah. I mean, there's the stronghold listings you can check out right on the fleet, and you can visit people's strongholds even.
Yeah, and some of them are really nice. So I can recommend that if you're like maybe waiting in the queue and bored, just go to someone's stronghold and have a look around.
Yeah,
some of them have quite neat ideas, and then you'll find the one that goes back to the old days and is just filled with 1,000 posters to get to 100% completion or something.
Yeah. Rapidly clicking decorations. Yeah. I like I mean, I'm not the big stronghold guy in this game, at least. I have a couple of them decorated, but like mostly the random stuff you get from PvP seasons. They give them to you and you have to put them somewhere, I guess. I like the game with the best housing that I played so far. I think was probably WildStar. Like, did you ever try that?
No, I didn't, but I heard about the housing and that it was great. People also have a lot of good things to say about Elder Scrolls Online's housing, for example. But I think I actually prefer SWTOR, and I mean, people say it's limited with the hooks and stuff. But I actually like that makes it a bit easier if you're not that much into it. It makes it a bit easier to place things in a kind of normal way. I remember in ESO, just trying to place a chest, I found that very fiddly because it doesn't let you move things freely, but that also means you kind of have to be good at it to not make a complete mess out of it. So I prefer a little bit more guidance there.
Yeah, the hook system in SWTOR is a bit, in some places is a bit unfortunate. Like I tried to build a PvP arena, for example, or with the hardball thing you were talking about earlier. In some places, I just wish they could have put a bit more into it to make it really cool. Because now how it is, I feel like I put my decorations there, and then sometimes I don't really know what to do with it. Or you have a cool idea, I don't know, let's build a swimming pool here or something, but it doesn't just quite work out because you're missing some slots or there's some weird collision effects happening that you didn't plan for. And you cannot make some, I don't know, there's this new one from the PvP season, for example, which is like how's it called? It's not walk the plank, it's the other one. Which is like a circle similar to the PvP arena. But you cannot jump in the middle, which is really frustrating because there's some water in the middle, and I just want to jump in there, take a bath like after a spicy PvP match, but you cannot jump in there. It's frustrating me a lot.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, but you can get somehow stuck in there if you move the decoration and then move it a bit and then hide the hooks again, and then you're in there. But
that does happen to me. You can also trap other people that way if they're in your stronghold.
But it doesn't really count as swimming, I'm afraid. Listen, we are almost 3 hours in. I need to grab some food. I'm actually starving.
It's probably a good idea for me as well, to be honest.
Got a little drink. Thanks for doing this. It was a lot of fun.
Same. Thank you.
Good to see another fellow content creator who enjoys this game. Actually, how have you managed to... Did you really, I forgot that question actually, did you actually play the game for, what is it now, 11, 12 years without a break? Like what was your longest break?
No, there was never a real break. I mean, there were times when I didn't play as much. Like when WoW Classic came out, for example, I was really into that. So I would just log on for ops or whatever and not do anything else. But there was never a time when I didn't play at all, or wasn't subscribed, or wasn't blogging about it at all. So definitely, I don't know, I'm not ashamed about playing it less when I sometimes don't feel like it, but there's always something interesting for me to get back to. And I guess the guild also helps to keep me anchored, you could say, because obviously we do ops and things to other activities together. So I want to show up for those at the very least.
Guilds are pretty cool. Yeah.
Yep, we can agree on that.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you again. Also, thanks for putting out all the content that you do. Put a link to the blog, of course, in the description as in all the podcasts, so people can check you out.
Thank you.
And any last words?
No, just thanks for inviting me. This was fun, and keep up the good work, trying to help people out to getting into PvP.
That's the plan. Will do.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks as well. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.